Welcome to the October 16th, 2012 meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have a roll call, please?
Council members: Friedman.
Here.
Manukian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilmember Najarian, the invocation by Rabbi Bachman of the Chabad Jewish Center of Glendale.
Let's please rise. Place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Remain standing for the invocation.
The Liberty Bell is an iconic symbol of American independence, located in Philadelphia, also known as the city of brotherly love. On it is inscribed those eternal words from which the biblical book of Leviticus, and I quote, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land and unto all the inhabitants thereof." These words have guided us as a nation since we declared our independence in 1776. They guide us ever so much today as we navigate the difficult challenges that face our city, our country, and indeed the entire world. At this juncture in American history, we unite faith and freedom by asserting that liberty is a gift from God, endowed upon every single American, regardless of race, color, creed, gender, or religious affiliation. During this election season, we are reminded that the role of our elected leaders is to be sincere custodians of these liberties and defenders of the people. So let us settle our hearts for just a moment in prayer. Eternal God, you enlighten our lives by empowering us to do your work here on earth in creating a world of liberty, justice, and peace for all. We pray for the city of Glendale that it may forever be a beacon of freedom, human rights, and economic opportunity. Protector of mankind, may your name be invoked only to inspire and unify our city, but never to divide it. We ask that you place your blessing upon the mayor and all elected officers of our city, that they may lead wisely and with civility, and work together for our common good. Guide them, that they may ever be champions for justice. These things we ask of you, eternal God, committed that the torch of liberty shall pass from hand to hand, from heart to heart, until the radiance of peace and righteousness shines for all of God's children, from one end of the earth to the other. Amen.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, may we have your report?
The agenda for the October 16th, 2012 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, October 11th, 2012 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next?
3, presentation and appointments. At 3A is agenda preview for the meetings of October 23, 2012.
Ms. Beers.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for the Glendale Housing Authority for October 23rd, we have no business agenda items. That afternoon, to commence at 3 p.m., we do have a Glendale Successor Agency special meeting, and this is Director of Community Development regarding the Alex Regional Theater Quarterly Report and final audited year-end financial statement from Glendale Arts for the period of April 1st to June 30th of 2012. Also that afternoon, we have a Glendale City Council and Glendale Successor Agency meeting. We have 2 items: Director of Community Development, renovation of 216 South Brand Boulevard and Central Park Paseo in connection with spec number 3461, and Director of Community Development, proposed amendments to Title 12 of the GMC relating to the establishment of paseos. Again, that afternoon, we have a special public meeting of the Glendale City Council, and this is Director of Community Development, proposed Orange and Wilson Development Project to be located at 200 West Wilson Avenue. That evening, for the City Council meeting to commence at 6 p.m., we have an adoption of ordinance amending GMC Section 2.76 relating to the Historic Preservation Commission and Section 15.20 relating to historic preservation. And we have 1 item under action, General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, regarding presentation of Glendale Water and Power Water Division Capital Improvement Project Program. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Next, Mr. Kasakian.
Next is City Council and staff comments.
Mr. Manukian.
Yes, I just want to inform everyone, just for the record, I know it's a full house, that I have to be out of these chambers at 10:30 because of work, believe it or not. And my council colleagues as well, that I will have to leave at 10:30. I know it's a full agenda, but I will do my best. Hopefully, it won't take that long. So.
And we'll try to get through the agenda as quickly as possible. Ms. Friedman.
A few things. First, last week, I attended, along with my colleagues, the Fire Awards lunch for our fire department, which was sponsored by the Kiwanis in Glendale. We were able to honor several of our brave firefighters who have literally risked life and limb. Also, we learned about a lot of the great charitable events that the fire department is doing, so I wanted to congratulate everybody. I also had the honor on Saturday night to MC the fundraising event for Neighborhood Legal Services that they do every year. If you're not familiar with Neighborhood Legal Services, they provide free and low-cost legal services for people in Los Angeles County, and they're headquartered here in Glendale. They do an amazing job helping people with everything from divorce proceedings to civil proceedings to giving them immigration advice. It's a very important role that they serve here in the community. They do a great job, and I hope they made a lot of money in their event. Lastly, you watching at home or here in the chambers have probably read in the Glendale News Press about the layoffs that we've had in the city. We had a round of layoff a few months back, and then we just regrettably had more layoffs this week affecting our utility, GWP. And I know some of those people are here in the room today. I just want to say that this is, in my mind, a very tragic event. I mean, these are people who live and work in our community, people who have dedicated their lives to the city of Glendale and to serving its residents. And I take absolutely no joy. In fact, I find it extremely sad that due to economics and other factors, we've had to lay off so many of our employees. The employees have served the city admirably, and they don't deserve this. I wish that there was another way, and I hope that we can bring people back as the times change. You know, I really don't know what else to say except to send my regrets and my really heartfelt and sincere hopes that all those people who are affected can land on their feet. Because I think that it's happening here, it's happening all across the country, that people are losing good jobs, and it's a very sad statement about our economy and what's happening in this nation. So I really don't know what else to say, but I want to just let those people who are affected know that I think that a lot of us here on the dais, probably all of us, really care a lot and really hate to see this happen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, I know we all feel that way, and hopefully there will be some callbacks as things improve. Mr. Najarian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended a couple events this weekend. The Kiwanis Duck Splash, held in conjunction with the canines in the park. It was a wonderful event, and again, a great idea to combine both of those events for both dog lovers and supporters of the charitable work of the Kiwanis. A very great event. For those people that support a tunnel, a 5-mile tunnel connecting the 710 freeway to the 210, your bad news continues. I'm sorry to say it. Actually, I'm not sorry to say it. I'm happy to say it. I'm happy to say that the city of Sierra Madre unanimously voted against the tunnel, to oppose the 710 tunnel. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see similar votes by the city of Pasadena, Monrovia, Arcadia, and right down the 210 corridor once the residents there realize the huge impact that that is going to have on their communities. Mr. Mayor, I would like to, we do have an election coming up, November 6th, on many different issues, of course the national election, but we have one issue of importance involving transportation in LA County, and that is Measure J. And with your indulgence, I would like to invite the CEO of MTA or his designee, either the CEO or his deputy, to come before us and give us a short summary of what Measure J would mean, and at the end of that, or on the agenda, place a non-binding resolution on the council to support Measure J.
Okay, so ordered.
I'm sorry, there's one thing I forgot, just going back to the layoffs for a minute. There's a little bit of good news, just a little bit, which is that 3 of the workers at GWP who were issued layoff notices, it turns out that they're actually going to be able to be retained because enough people took the retirement incentives in that department. So, small condolence for those who are being laid off, but I think we are doing our best to keep as many people as we can.
Okay, on that note, Mr. Ochoa, can you make just a few comments on that issue? Because we are trying to, obviously, those people that have been laid off, trying to bring them back.
Absolutely, sir. We did issue layoff notices to 28 employees, and following the pattern that we experienced with the balance of the city budget, where we also offered in tandem a retirement incentive, we had a number of employees opt for the retirement incentive. The good news there is that as folks exit through the incentive, it gives us additional flexibility to retain others. When you look at where in this case, the utility has been over the first part of this fiscal year and in the budget deliberations that council exercised heading into this fiscal year. As you recall, we entered 12-13 with a $10.8 million deficit in GWP, and that is something that we cannot ignore. We need to be able to fill that hole as best we can, and just as we saw in the balance of the operation, the only way to generate significant savings in operations, not the buying and selling of power, but in actual operations, is through personnel. We are a service organization, and so the vast majority of our cost, the vast bulk of our cost, is people. And so we are having to go through that task. There has been some discussion as to the timing, whether or not we would wait until an MOU had been finalized with IBEW for purposes of moving forward with the layoff. The problem that we have, however, is that no one knows exactly when that negotiation is going to wrap up. And again, we entered the year with a $10.8 million deficit, so we needed to make adjustments sooner than later. We will be back to you at mid-year budget with an assessment as to where we are with a report from our new director or general manager of the utility. And we will have to understand and reconcile at that point as to whether or not we need additional layoffs. At the end of the day, we're trying to add up all of the resources and liabilities of the organization. Nothing more, but certainly nothing less.
I thank you. Some of the events have already been mentioned, but the Fire Service Award is always a highlight of my year, just listening to the stories and having the firefighters talk about their job, the job that they chose to do, which, while sometimes it appears very glamorous and may even appear easy when you see them at the fire station, it's not particularly glamorous, and it's absolutely not easy, physically or mentally, for them and their families. We also, the city manager and I attended the Relay for Life, which is sort of devoted to raising funds on cancer research, and the Kiwanis Duck Splash. The Neighborhood Legal Services does a great job. They're actually located in Adams Square, even though they serve this whole region, and their gala at the Gene Autry Museum. I recommend the people that haven't been there to go. It's just a wonderful, wonderful setting. Any comments from the staff? Okay. I would like to kind of go out of order and bring Dr. Jim Riggs, who's the interim superintendent and president, and I believe the entire board of Glendale Community College to the podium. There's one person missing, but it's almost the entire board.
She's on her way. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, and members sitting at the dais, Mr. Clerk. We're delighted to take this opportunity to come and introduce our interim superintendent, Dr. Jim Riggs. I think all of Glendale should get to know him as we have, and we bring special greetings to Mr. Najarian, who is a board member with us. And I have to tell you, during such dark, cloudy times that you face, that we face, layoffs and budget crises, sometimes stars do shine, and we look at Dr. Riggs as a star who's shining at GCC. I would like to tell you a little bit about him. He has an extensive background in community college leadership and instruction. He has taken a one-year leave from his family. Well, he goes back and visits them, but from Cal State Stanislaus to serve as our interim superintendent, president, and guess where he lives? At the Americana. So you can't get any more Glendalian than that. Since 2008, he has served as a professor of community college education, and he has taught full-time in the doctoral programs in educational leadership at a variety of institutions. And he was, for 10 years, president at Columbia College in Sonora, California. And he has held a variety of positions, and he also has a career in music, which hopefully we'll get to hear one of these days. And he's a very methodical person. He approaches issues system-wide. So he has taken charge, and as I said earlier to the school district, there is nothing interim about him. He is doing everything and more than what he is expected to do. We are honored to have him with his 35 years of experience in educational leadership and supervision. And he has a wife, Julianne, whom I'm sure is missing him quite a bit. And they have 3 grown children who live in Northern California with their families. They have 2 wonderful children, and they have 2 wonderful grandchildren. Before I give the podium for my colleagues, we want to thank you in person for donating a fire engine to Glendale Community College. We appreciate that, and we're honored that you chose our institution to give the fire engine. Of course, we wouldn't have let you give it to someone else, but Glendale College.
Just so people understand it, it's also for training purposes. We have a class.
Absolutely. So if your house is on fire,
it's not like y'all are running around in it, right?
Right. We also want to stress the importance of this coming election and the importance of passing of Proposition 30, because it will have a great impact on the education. We've already cut classes, and we're going to continue classes, so let's all hope for the best. And we also have an 85th anniversary coming up next week, and we hope to see all of you there celebrating with us. It'll be a grand affair which will be held at our college. If you have any questions about that, call our foundation office. So Mrs. Anita Gabrielian is on her way here. Hopefully she'll get here. And we have Miss Ann Ransford, our vice president. She's someone who spent many, many years at Glendale College. We have our clerk, Dr. Vaya Perumian, our past president, Mr. Tony Tartaglia. And before we give the podium to Dr. Riggs, I'm sure they have some welcoming comments. So please go ahead.
Well, I would just like to thank you all for having us here this evening, and again emphasize what a wonderful relationship we have with the City of Glendale and how special that is for Glendale College, and how much we appreciate all of you, those of you that are alumni, like Dave over there, and all of you and everything that you've done to make our success too. And just emphasize everything that Dr. Hakopian has said about how wonderful it is to have Dr. Riggs at the helm, and what a great job he's doing. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. We've been very impressed with Dr. Riggs just in the last 3 months, and I hope that you'll be able to interact with him like you did with Dr. Don Lindsay before, and build on the relationships that we started, and work hand in hand in these trying times. Thank you very much for inviting us, and we'll let Dr. Riggs impress you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, thank you for the relationship we've had at the college. I'd like to echo all of the comments of my colleagues, but I'd like to be specific on what you've done for this college. Glendale Water and Power, we have had an excellent relationship with the Utility Academy, with all other functions associated with it. You have put great resources into the college with that. The Fire Academy.
We should ask the gas company to give you guys a discount.
We try. Everything you can hold in your hand, I'll give it to you. The Fire Academy is stellar. As you know, many fire companies use our training as their only training procedures. And I'd like to leave it with a congratulations to you. In these dire times, as Councilmember Friedman has pointed out, this city has had to make hard decisions. However, I read in the paper that what you again have done for the citizens of Glendale is your fire department has been rated once again as a Class 1 fire department. And I think the citizens of Glendale need to know that that rating is material to their pocketbook. When I moved here to Glendale from Sherman Oaks, I lived in a 1,700 square foot house on a 7,000 foot piece of property, and I moved into the hillside on 11,000 foot in a fire zone, and my insurance dropped over $150 a year. That's because of the City of Glendale and its fire department. So congratulations, Chief Scoggins, and congratulations to you, City Council.
We're now going to give the podium to Dr. Riggs, and again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. I realize you have a large agenda ahead of you. I just want to thank you for allowing us to come here and to introduce myself, Mr. Mayor and council members. I look forward to working with you, and of the last 3.5 months that I've lived here in Glendale, I couldn't be more happy. What a beautiful city you have, and what a wonderful place to live. And I was, of course, very excited to be selected to be the interim president at Glendale Community College, having worked for literally decades in the state. Glendale Community College is one of the most outstanding institutions. It's well known throughout the state and throughout the nation. I look forward to working with all of you and with the city in any way we can. So again, thanks for having us this evening, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Riggs, and welcome. Okay, next, please.
Next on the agenda are the consent items under 5. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
8C.
8C is in 5C, sorry.
Mayor, move the remainder of the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. To read 5C into the
5C is Director of Public Works regarding extension of the modern parking contract and increase existing amount. C1 is a motion executing amendment to the existing agreement for a one-year extension period for a fee not to exceed $1,798,500 for a total contract amount not to exceed $7,120,044.
Just for the record, Mr. City Attorney, I'm a tenant in that parking structure, which I pay monthly rent for parking. Would I have a conflict in this instance?
Is that a rental that's available to anybody?
Yes.
Then no, you would not have a conflict.
Having said that, I've been less than pleased with the service that this contractor have been providing, and we're voting no on this item.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
No.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next, please.
Next item under oral communications. This is a 3-minute portion reserved for community event announcements. We will revisit the full 5-minute portion of oral communications at the conclusion of all agendized city business.
Okay, I have Dr. Stella Bagdasarian, followed by Leon Mayer. Doctor, please introduce your other guest tonight.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stella Bagdasarian. This is Helene Pirumian and Alina. We're all part of the Armenian Bone Marrow Donor Registry, and we're here to present our walkathon, which we'll be having Saturday, October the 20th. A little about our organization. The type of cancer that our organization deals with is leukemia or blood cancer. And each year, about 30,000 patients are diagnosed with leukemia or aplastic anemia and other life-threatening blood diseases. Only 30% of the patients find a match within their family, and the other 70% really rely on the donors. For minority groups such as Hispanics, Armenians, and Jews, this percentage is higher because there are less minority donors registered in marrow registries. The mission of our organization is to find that compatible matched donor for all patients, Armenians and non-Armenians, who are suffering from the blood-related diseases. Since 2001, which our organization got established, we have recruited about 22,000 donors, and actually I'm glad to announce that just this past month we have 750 donors added to our registry. We're a full member of World Marrow Donor Worldwide and cooperative member of American National Donor Program. Throughout our yearly outreach programs, such as our annual walkathon, we're trying to raise awareness within Glendale community, encouraging community members to participate in this life-saving cause. I'll have Tallene explain to you a little bit about our walk and the logistics, and I hope that this year all of the council members will join our efforts for this life-saving operation. Thank you, and thank you for your time and support.
Good evening. The walkathon, as mentioned, will be held on Saturday, October 20th. The registration will start promptly at 7:30 a.m. until 8:30 a.m. at Glendale Memorial Hospital and Health Center at 222 Eulalia Street, Glendale, off of Brand, at which point we will have our opening ceremony. The walk will start at 9 a.m. walking north on Central Avenue to Lexington Street, at which point we'll be greeted by the staff at Consulate General of Republic of Armenia. We will proceed east on Lexington and then south on Brand Boulevard back to Glendale Memorial Hospital for our closing ceremonies. We invite all of council members and their families, and of course everyone at the City of Glendale, to join us at the walk. You can visit us at www.abmdr.am to register online, and if you are unable to walk with us on that day, we also invite people to register and become virtual walkers. Thank you for your time and support.
Thank you very much.
Just wanted to say that I will be there to join you, as I have in the last couple of years. This is such an important cause. I know I say this over and over again, but it bears repeating that I had a friend that I met who had gone through breast cancer treatment, who developed leukemia as a result of her treatment, who died of that leukemia for one reason, which was that she was unable to find a bone marrow donor. She was an ethnic minority, and even though they had a registry, there weren't enough people in her minority who registered to find her a match. So for everyone out there, regardless of your ethnicity, this is such an important event to support, and please consider being bone marrow donor as well. And thank you all for coming today.
Thank you so much.
I will also be there, and I had the opportunity to visit the clinic in Yerevan, Armenia. Just a beautiful location, super clean, and very impressive. So,
Thank you again.
thank you. Leon Mayer.
Good evening, Mayor Quintero, members of the council and staff.
Followed by Seda Arazumian.
My name is Leon Mayer, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the library and the Friends of the Library. First of all, on November 6th, from 5 to 8 p.m., the library auditorium will be open with TV so people can come and watch the election results and so forth. So I thought that's something there a lot of people would be interested in, and the doors of the library open to serve you that evening. Now, on the day after the election, we're having an event at the library, and we hope that people will not be so exhausted that they can't come to the library on Wednesday, November 7th. And we're having a phenomenal individual author who's going to talk about his book, The 100 Greatest Americans of the 20th Century, a Social Justice Hall of Fame. I have that book here, and on the outer cover is the names of the 100 most outstanding people who lived in this country over the last 100 years, in the last century. And most Americans know little of this progressive history about these people and what they stood for and what they accomplished. It isn't taught at most high schools, and you won't find it on the major television and everything. But let me tell you something. It's important, and it's important to know. I appeared at the Unified School District meeting today, and I feel so strong about our bringing Dr. Peter Dwyer, a Occidental College professor who written this book. He's lectured all over the country. He's prominent, and we're glad to do this at the time we're helping Occidental celebrate their 125th anniversary. And Dr. Dwyer makes this comment. 100 years ago, any soapbox orator who called for women's suffrage, laws protecting the environment, an end to lynching, federal minimum wages, or utopian dreamer were considered utopian dreamers, and that goes for the environment, if you remember Rachel Carlson as well. And we stand on the shoulders of this generation of people who were kind of called reformers or radicals at that time, and fortunately for all of us, most of what they stood for has been accomplished and accepted in our society. So please come to see us the evening of November 7th, 7 o'clock at the library. Remember, parking is validated for 3 hours by parking at the structure next to the library. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Seda Arazumian. And
Hello.
please, give us your name for the record. So we.
Yeah, Seda Arzumanyan from Habitat for Humanity Armenia. Dear Mayor, dear City Council members, thank you for the opportunity to giving us to make her speak. So I'm with my colleagues. So Luisa Vartanyan, Habitat for Humanity Armenia Executive Director, and also Jonathan Reckford from Habitat for Humanity International. So Habitat for Humanity Armenia is a national organization that works in Armenia, and we are looking to provide housing support services and to improve housing conditions of low-income families in Armenia. And we have worked in Armenia, started 2000, it's already 12 years. We have supported low-income families to improve their housing conditions. And this is a great job, and we are here. So yesterday we have arrived from Armenia, and this is a fundraising campaign, and we are going to ask support from Armenian diaspora through Armenian people and Armenian churches to partner with us and to serve more low-income families in Armenia. The housing issue is great in Armenia, and there are a lot of Armenian families that need of safe, decent, and affordable housing. So we are here, and we have brought our materials, and everyone in Armenia that's located in the U.S., we suggest a partnership, and we are open to work together. So, and we plan to serve 970 families during this year, and we need fundraising for $180,000. So we have secured $1 million, so we need this money to achieve our goal, which is serve more about 1,000 families. So here we are going to distribute the materials. Here the people can find the materials, and also how to donate to Habitat Armenia. Thank you. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Luisa Vartanyan, the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity Armenia, and as my colleague said, she said, we are here with fundraising purpose trip, and we really we are looking for new cooperations, for possible cooperations, and we are open for networking as well. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
And my name is Jonathan Good. I'm with Habitat for Humanity International, and I would simply add that in addition to building in Armenia, Habitat for Humanity San Gabriel Valley has been very involved in building right here in Glendale with and for the residents of Glendale, and that's been a great privilege as well. And finally, on a personal note, I bring formal greetings from my father-in-law, Jim Rez, who sat in the city manager chair here for many years. He wishes you all well.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, the final card is from Rachel Linden.
Hello, I'm Rachel Linden, and I'm with the Institute for Responsible Technology in Jeffrey Smith. We educate about the harmful effects of GMOs, which are genetically modified organisms. That constitutes 75 to 90% of processed foods in a grocery store, and most Americans are unaware they're eating them. You do have a labeling initiative going right now, Prop 37. We're not associated with Prop 37. However, we are the educational piece that will help the voters in Glendale make excellent educated decisions about their right to know what goes in their mouth and in their food. We have several events that we're doing in California, 100 events that include movie nights featuring genetic roulette. It's a new documentary by our institute, by Jeffrey Smith. And we have one happening Sunday, October 21st at 1:30 p.m. at the Glendale Public Library. And I'll have flyers in the back for those that are interested. We're also doing viewings and showings and speaker lectures with the world's foremost experts in genetically modified foods in California. And if you're interested in hearing or seeing those speakers, I'm happy to arrange that, or we can send videos. We are a small group based out of Iowa, but we're making a big splash educating the public about the food supply. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's the end of oral communications. What's next, Mr. Clerk?
Moving on to the action items, at 8A is City Treasurer regarding changes to the city's investment policy. At 8A1 is a resolution approving and adopting revised city investment policy for fiscal year 2012-13. At 8A2 is a resolution approving a joint powers agreement with LA County and establishing a new investment account at LA County Treasury Pool.
Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. Mr. Baruki and his committee have come up with several suggestions that he will outline for you for our investments. Mr. Baruki.
Thank you. Mayor Quintero, council members, pleased to be here this evening. You know, once in a while it's good that we review the investment options in the city portfolio with the events that are taking place in the marketplace. It's been 4 years since the financial meltdown occurred back in the fall of 2008. And since that time, the portfolio has been burdened with historically low interest rates. Here we are, 4 years in. The financial landscape is still suffering. The economy is still sluggish, and our return to economic recovery is too far off to predict with any certainty. The news that we do get isn't all good. Fed Chairman Bernanke, for example, tells us with certitude that the historic low interest rates that we're dealing with right now will be with us for another 2 and probably 3 years. But let's take a look at where we are today. And I don't have a PowerPoint. I've got 2 slides. Pretty much should tell the story. And effectively what we're trying to do tonight is add new investment categories to the portfolio, and to those investment categories that we use and we have a percentage of participation, for example, commercial paper or maybe corporate notes, where we're capped at a certain level, we're asking that we add to that percentage so we can increase our participation. But let's take a look at our portfolio. What I've put up on the screen is our portfolio from August 31st, and let's just say that the bottom line there tells us the total. We've got $385 million in the portfolio. That $385 million is all in those different investment categories. The first three categories is the longer end of the portfolio. This is how we read the portfolio. The first two categories are what we call our meat and potatoes investments, federal agencies, term notes, and callable bonds. You put them together and they represent about 54% of the portfolio. Add to that the corporate medium-term notes, and these are the investments that we make in corporate America. In the portfolio right now we have GE, we have Bank of America, we have Wells Fargo, we have AT&T. Right now we have about 15% of the portfolio in corporates. You put those three together, and our longer end of the portfolio, again, the longer end are investments that we're buying for 2, 3, 4, and going out to 5 years. Represents about 69% of our portfolio. Starting with commercial paper and working our way down, certificates of deposit, local agency investment fund, that's the state pool, money market mutual funds. Those are investments that we prefer to call we're parking money, where we take money in, and we're not exactly sure what the purpose of that money is for, how long it's going to be with us, and temporarily we'll find a home for it. Everything centers around the local agency investment fund, which has been a great place for liquidity at a very, very reasonable return. Except for the last several years, the last 4 years, where we've had extremely low rates. Everything there, as you can see, the average comes out to a little over 1% for the entire portfolio. But in any event, that's sort of the composition of our portfolio. Now, what's happened or changed out there in our marketplace? Because if you pulled up our portfolio from 5 years ago, it would probably look like this. Those would be about the same categories that we had then. You go back 10 years, it would probably still look like this. What's changed is that our meat and potato categories, the federal agencies, and for the folk out in TV land, when we're talking about federal agencies, we're talking about Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the Federal Home Loan Bank, and the Federal Farm Credit Bureau. But basically, the ones that come to the market most would be Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, as most of you know here, are the largest holders of all home mortgages in the United States. Their holdings right now are probably 65 to 70%. Well, what's happened in the past year is that they've been told to straighten their balance sheets. And that means that they're looking at their holdings, they're looking at their loans, they're looking at their documentation. So their focus has shifted from going out and acquiring more, putting out bonds, and buying. So what we've seen a tremendous fall off in the availability of Fannie Mae's and Freddie Mac's. And so where we would see a dozen a day of Fannie Mae's and Freddie Mac's, now we're looking at probably 3 to 4 in our marketplace. One thing the low rates have done, and Fed Chairman Bernanke also has contributed to this with his qualitative easing 1 and 2, not only have we lowered rates in our marketplace from 1 to 5 years, but we've also lowered rates from 5 to 10. It's a great boon to the housing market, or it should be. That's the goal. But what we see here, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, when they are going out to market, they're not even going out with 3, 4, and 5-year paper that we can purchase. They're now putting out paper that's 5.5 years, 7 years, all the way out to 10, because they're taking advantage of the rates also. So what we need is to kind of find new investment categories to help provide us the investment options that we need at the longer end. Moving down to the shorter end, again, under 1 year, where we are, what we say, parking money temporarily. As you recall, earlier this calendar year, the state of California came along and took away, removed the redevelopment agency. We had a third LAIF, the third LAIF account that the city had was headed up redevelopment agency. We took that $40 to $50 million out, and we turned around and found home for that money in other areas. Effectively, what we need to help us, because in addition to having that money, the 40 or 50 million from the redevelopment agency that's there waiting for the call from the governor to, once that it's determined as to what we need to settle up, we also had calls on our federal agency paper coming in. So we had a bunch of money, total 70, 75, 80 million that we had to find a home for, and we needed a little more room to operate. I think we've found a replacement for the local agency investment fund. Let's move to our next slide. And what we've got here is just basically a review. We've separated the long end from the short end. We took a look at most of the categories. These aren't all. There are other categories that could be considered, but these are the ones that are reasonable that we ought to be looking at with the size of our portfolio and our investment pattern. I didn't mention U.S. Treasuries. U.S. Treasuries, of course, is something that we can invest in. We don't, only because, well, they just don't pay very much. We could have bought a 5-year Treasury this morning and gotten a return of 69 basis points. That's a little more than 0.5% for 5 years. The federal agencies we've already discussed will continue to look there. But what we're suggesting is highlighted, and we're looking at those 3 items that we want council to consider. State of California. Interestingly enough, our investment portfolio, our investment policy does not permit us now to invest in state of California bonds or debt, as well as local agencies in California. Our current city policy is 0. We're suggesting or recommending that we turn around and start off with baby steps and go up to 15% of our portfolio, working off of a number that we've been revolving around for the last 6 to 9 months, about $400 million, give or take $10 million or so. That would represent holdings of about $60 million. Obligations of other states, like the state of California, no reason why we shouldn't consider debt obligations from other states. We think that probably, again, doing this cautiously and prudently, we'd probably recommend 10% to test the water. That would represent on a $400 million portfolio, $40 million in investments and other state issues. Many states, surprisingly, are not in the condition of the state of California, or New York, or New Jersey, or Illinois. There's a heck of a lot of states that are AAA rated and present good opportunities for us. Corporate medium-term notes. This was the big item 4 years ago with the financial meltdown. We were concerned because we were at risk. And quite frankly, corporate medium-term notes would be the risk category in our portfolio. This is what we use to supplement return. It's in the corporate world. I think we weathered the storm well over the last 4 years. And we think at this time that we can asked for an increase from 15% up to 20%, an increase of 5. The 5% represents $20 million. So our total holdings there would be now $20 million, or roughly $80 million of the portfolio. So we've got two new categories that we're asking for: State of California lumped in with California local agencies. And by the way, by including California local agencies, that would permit us also to buy our own debt, whether it be GWP or, well, whatever other debt the city would be issuing. So we've got that item as new, and obligations of other states. The change would be, in addition to the corporate medium-term notes of 5%. Moving to the short end, let's just, to keep things short, I'll just work with the highlighted items. What we want to do, remember, the important thing is to find a replacement for the state pool, that third local agency investment fund account that we had to give up. We are recommending that we open an account with the Los Angeles County. They've got a pool themselves. Heard a presentation from the county treasurer a few months ago. I had forgotten all about the county pool, to tell you truthfully. When I was working the other side in the banking world, the county was always there, but local agencies in the county usually did not participate because it was so conservative, it didn't return anything. The new treasurer, new to me, but he's been there for 12 years, has a different approach. It's still very conservative. They invest in the same things that the state pool, the local agency investment pool, invests in. It's the same instruments that we invest in. It's basically this laundry list that you see here. They have a total of $21 billion. Now, let me just mention who some of their clients are. They have the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, has about $250 million there, and the South Coast Air Quality Management District, $500 million, so $500 million. Their biggest holdings are non-discretionary. This means that the county is the banker for the Los Angeles School District. So there's 10.8, almost $11 billion of the school system's money in that in this county fund. It is attractive return compared to LAIF. It has a little different rules, a little more restrictive, but we can work it. The return as for the end of June, this is just for the month, was 86 basis points. 86 basis points compared to LAIF. LAIF's return was 36 basis points. We would recommend that we start off slowly with this one too, baby steps, just to feel our way through it. There's no limit. We can invest as much as we want, but we're recommending that we take the conservative approach and probably start off with 10% of the portfolio on the short end. That 10% would represent no more than $40 million. My idea would be to start off with something like 20 or 25. That pretty much is the presentation. What we're trying to do here is to include and add as many asset classes as practicable in order to provide increased investment opportunities and to diversify risk. So, folks, that concludes my remarks. Open to questions.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, well, I'm in agreement. The corporate paper, commercial paper, it's only going to be, 17.5% under this new policy, so it's still somewhat minimal because, in my opinion, I mean, you keep thinking somehow in the old days it was a government that was stable and theoretically government had money. Now it's absolutely the reverse. It's large corporate entities that have money. I don't know where I read the statistics, but American corporations have between $1.4 trillion and $1.7 trillion in cash. So that's a sizable amount of money, I think.
Is that just Apple or the rest?
Yeah, just Apple, probably half is Apple. But anyway, I think it makes sense. You talked about meat and potatoes. I think they're in the private sector, so it makes sense to increase our participation in the corporate medium notes and in the commercial paper. And as it is, it's only 17%.
So it'll work up to 20%.
Yeah,
is really what it is. But Mr. Quintero, my approach there is really because this is the riskiest portion of the portfolio. Well, rather than turn around and go up to the 30% limit that the state permits, it's almost as if providing a target that we should fill up. It's a bucket or a bushel that we want to fill up. With these, particularly in this economy, which still needs some improving, I'd like to work our way up, fill up the next 5%, and if we're successful there and things are still stable out in the economy, and maybe things are improving, we'll move from there.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. You termed it riskier, but quite frankly, is it riskier than the state of California or some of the other states in this country? I'm not too sure.
You've got a very good point there.
That's
the state treasurer
so.
keeps saying, as bad as we are and as big as our deficit, we're still A-rated, and they're looking for an upgrade. So, we can say, go figure. The state has been in this awful situation for a number of years. They keep talking about reducing their deficit, but effectively it's always there. Again, we're not going long-term here with the state of California. We're restricted to going 5 years, no more than 5. And I think that my approach would be to start off with the short stuff, probably trends, tax revenue anticipation notes, doing that within a year, getting a comfort level, seeing how successful the governor is in his proposals and how successful the new legislature is in helping balance the budget.
Mr. Najari?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Baruchi, I know you do a lot of research up there in your office, financial and economic. So about 60 days ago, the Fed chief, Bernanke, implemented the quantitative easing.
Yep.
And there's a lot of discussion on that. Some feel that it will keep rates low. Others feel it's going to fuel a huge inflationary drive. First off, where do you foresee the economy going and rates in the next 12 months, the short term?
Bernanke's been cautioned about inflation since he started bringing rates down 4 years ago, and it hasn't happened yet. If he says that by their tea leaves it's going to be another 2 or 3 years, his track record is something that I would not bet against.
If in fact inflation does start to, some are predicting huge inflation because the quantitative easing is quite an unusual measure that the Fed can take. Are we going to be in a position to take advantage of that and not be locked in too long in some of our long-term obligations and the more stable obligations where we can take advantage of the ensuing increase in returns?
I think if you look at our portfolio, one thing that we do well is manage the weighted average maturity of our portfolio. I think we try to stay, right now I think we're at 22 months. We could be anywhere between 2 years to 2.5 years. Going out to the 4 and 5 year position as far as maturities, I believe right now, just off the top of my head, I believe we're at somewhere around 12 or 13%. So many times I come here and I explain why our portfolio is so liquid, and it's for that very reason. It isn't so much inflation that I'm worried about, but I'm worried about the marketplace running away from him, from Bernanke and what he's trying to do, and simply moving and rates going up, and we getting caught with a lot of 1% paper when all of a sudden we find ourselves living in a 3.5% to 4% environment.
With regard to our percentage that that you're proposing to go into the corporate notes, how safe are the corporate notes nowadays? A few years ago, someone would have said, myself being a shareholder of GM, the former GM, I lost my investment. And there are those who said GM is as stable as a company there could be. What sort of safeguards do you take when you pick out the bonds that are being up in terms of the viability, and do the rating companies really know what's going on when they give us ratings for those notes?
You recall 4 years ago, the big concern that we had was with our portfolio and with the corporate holdings. And I think we've had this conversation. We were concerned about, you were concerned about Bank of America. I was concerned about some investment bank holdings that we had, and even GE Credit Corp. We stuck with it, and we worked our way out of it. In fact, I actually traded some of those investment banks away. As far as looking at the marketplace, we did not get stung with losses with Lehman Brothers. We did not get stung with Indy Bank. We did not take a loss on Washington Mutual. I don't think it's just luck. It's basically watching the marketplace and looking at good opportunities out there. Today, I bought a bank today. I bought a 3-year J.P. Morgan at 1.08. For 3-year money, I thought that was terrific. I would have bought more. I only bought $1 million worth, but because I'm still living with the cap, that's all I could allow was $1 million.
And we haven't lost anything in your tenure.
That's correct. That's correct.
Is that luck or good investment policy?
Well, you make the call.
I'm asking
You've worked with me long
think?
enough. We'll just let the record speak for itself, Mr. Najarian. Thank you.
Just 3 minutes.
So the government, the state agencies.
Yes.
Now, how does that work? Do you go out and you actually buy bonds from individual cities, or is there some sort of a pool that you would buy?
They're sold.
The individual city bonds.
Yeah,
So
yes.
it's a similar question.
Similar to what we would be doing here at Glendale.
Got it. My similar question to Mr. Najarian, given what's been happening with cities, and given that the state controller has said that he anticipates more municipal bankruptcies,
right,
more cities going bankrupt, given that some of these cities, people in those cities, and I would assume at the state, were not given enough information about how shaky the ground was that those cities were on, how badly some of their investments were going. I think it's Stockton that had invested in a power plant that was not being built, but somehow this was off the radar. How can you judge which cities are worth buying these bonds and which cities are really in jeopardy or will be in jeopardy down the road? Just given that the state controller has said that we will see more municipal bankruptcies with the loss of redevelopment, with the loss of tax dollars, all of the other pressures on cities.
Well, exactly what you're saying. Because the warning is out, and because Moody's just announced that there's something like, I think, 25 or 30 cities on their watch list.
30 cities.
36, you know better than I. But let me just finish the point. What is interesting here is that there's a guide already. Right there it tells me these 36 I should probably watch very carefully. Stockton just went out with an issue yesterday. I don't think I'm going to be looking at Stockton, nor San Bernardino, nor Vallejo. I think in this environment where the rating services are looking very hard, very closely at what's happened in the state of California can only help the investor that does his homework.
But even with that Moody's list of 30 cities, it seems like a lot of those cities, even though they're being downgraded, are not necessarily cities that are on the verge of going bankrupt.
Oh, sure.
Long Beach, Santa Monica, Glendale. I mean, and these are, I think, relatively healthy cities. But some of these other cities, I don't know what Stockton's rating was. I don't know what San Bernardino's rating was. It almost seems like you need insider information about the management of the cities to really know
Wow.
which cities were in trouble. That's my concern with the,
Yeah.
with the public agencies in California.
Well, what we would be dealing with would be a broker that specialize, or brokers that specialize in this industry. This is an industry to itself. And remember, I'm also looking to invest our money with other states, with states that haven't had a problem or a concern and have run their fiscal affairs in a balanced and fair way. With the state, as I said, my approach is going to be very slow. I think this state, with the immense problems that it has, looking at the infrastructure, there's tremendous needs out here for water works, for irrigation, for aqueducts. Water will be an issue with not only the city of Glendale, but statewide, getting it from the south, from the north to the south. Transportation, my goodness, Mr. Najarian could talk, if we let him, he could talk for an hour and a half as to what the needs are, not only in our part of the woods, but also up and down the state. These are big projects. For the city the size of Glendale, with the portfolio that it has, to shut itself out from this investment opportunity, I don't know that that's the right approach. Again, the slow approach. This studied approach is probably the way that I'm trying to recommend.
Well, I hope that you, before buying any of the California agencies, you speak to Mr. Ochoa, because I'm assuming that there's a city manager grapevine, that they have some heads up about what cities are heading towards trouble and which ones aren't. So seriously, use him as a resource, because I think sometimes he'll have more information than Moody's will have on a lot of these cities.
Good point. Also, we might just start by buying at home with the city of Glendale or GWP, or buy our own.
I think that's a good investment.
Okay, do I have a motion? If there's
Move 8A, 1 and 2.
Second.
roll call.
I'm sorry, the second was from Councilmember Najarian. Thank you. Council members Friedman,
Yes.
Menuchyan,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. I'm going to go directly. I see that there's lots of folks here waiting for the hearing, so I want to have 9A read into the record, and we'll go directly to Rimcrest Drive.
Mayor and Council, at 9A under public hearings is Director of Community Development regarding appeal of parcel map GLN 1628 for property located at 2116 Rimcrest Drive. 9A1 is a resolution certifying a negative declaration. 9A2 is a motion sustaining the Planning Commission's decision and granting the parcel map based on findings and conditions. 9A3 is a motion reversing the Planning Commission's decision, continuing the matter to October 30th or next regular meeting thereafter, and directing the city attorney to prepare written findings in support of denial. 9A4 is a motion sustaining the Planning Commission's decision and granting the parcel map based on findings and conditions related to Chapter 30.11.040 of the zoning code related to hillside design guidelines.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, once you open the public hearing, there are additional documents that have been received by either opponents or proponents of the project. I would ask that you make those part of the record, as well as additional documents that have been provided both to Mr. Kasakian and are provided in the back related to this proposed subdivision.
Okay, I will open the public hearing, and please turn whatever documents you have over to the city clerk.
These documents pertinent to the decision we are about to make?
I would say
Should
yes,
we
but
have
they've been provided to you. They were, the emails that were sent to the council, and I'm just making sure that those are part of the record.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This hearing is for an appeal to the council of a June 6, 2012.
We need your name for the record.
I'm sorry, Brad Cullen. I'm a senior planner in the Community Development Department. As I mentioned, this is a hearing for an appeal to the City Council of a June 6, 2012 decision by the Planning Commission to approve a parcel map and adopt a negative declaration for a request to subdivide one residential lot with an average current slope that exceeds 20% into 3 residential lots and develop a single family on each of the 2 vacant lots at 2116 Rimcrest Drive. The slide that I'm showing here is an aerial view of the surrounding area. The subject property is highlighted in yellow with the approximate lot lines for the subdivision. The site is generally bounded by Aspen Oak on the south, Rimcrest Drive on the east. The site is slightly less than 100,000 square feet and contains one single-family residence, which is the highlighted area on green, accessed off of Rimcrest. Proposed lot areas would vary from about 29,000 square feet to about 35,000 square feet. The property is zoned R1R, which is restricted residential zone, and as you may have heard, there were some previous subdivisions, tract map 31888 and 31369, which are basically this area that you can see shown on the slide. It was a subdivision of about 30 acres and development of about 70 houses. The slide here is showing the parcel map. The two new lots slope up approximately 100 feet from Aspen Oak Lane to the north side of the site. The code requires that the average lot area to be 30,000 square feet. The proposed project complies with this. In addition, the proposed lot areas must not be less than the average lot area within 500 feet of the property. In this case, the average lot area is 22,000 square feet. The proposed project complies with this requirement as well. The existing single-family, as mentioned, is accessed off of Rimcrest Drive. The new lots would be accessed off of Aspen Oak. This slide will show views of the subject properties as viewed from Aspen Oak. This is the view of Lot 1 looking up to the north, Lot 2, and Lot 3. Planning Commission found that this project complies with the hillside design guidelines in the following ways. The homes are located at the bottom of the hill. There will be some grading and terracing around the houses, but the majority of the hillside will be undisturbed. Both houses are two-story, one at a height of 30 feet and the other at 32. This is Lot 3. The second story is set back from the street slightly further than the first floor for a terracing effect. Grading is reduced to the use of retaining walls, but they're not overly dramatic. And the houses are of modern design, and the use of flat roofs appear appropriate for the neighborhood due to the reducing of the overall volume. The basis for the appeal is that the appellant believes that there will be impacts on the neighborhood due to noise, traffic, dust, and concerns regarding grading that were not included as part of the SEQA review. The appellant also believes that the CC&Rs for the neighborhood restrict future subdivisions and developments. Design of the two new homes will be reviewed by the Design Review Board to determine compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood in terms of mass, scale, and architectural style. However, with the subdivision application, Council must consider hillside development review, which covers topics such as site layout, grading, as well as the size, scale, mass, and general architectural style of the proposed buildings. The project complies with all regulations of the zoning code, such as setbacks, height, lot coverage, the subdivision ordinance, including as stated before, the average and minimum lot sizes. Regarding CEQA, the impacts to noise, dust, and traffic would be temporary, limited to the construction period, and not considered significant. Regarding the CC&Rs, they are enforced between private parties and are not the basis for council action, either approval or denial. Planning Commission made the required findings to approve the tentative parcel map, subject to conditions, and adopted a negative declaration per CEQA. The motion in your packet is to sustain the Planning Commission's decision to approve parcel map GLN 1628 and adopt a revised resolution which includes findings for compliance with the Hillside Design Guidelines, which is Chapter 30.11.040. If the Council is inclined to reverse the prior decision and deny the application, an alternate draft motion is attached to report to continue the hearing and direct the city attorney to prepare written findings in support of denying the parcel map. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add that in addition to the presentation, we have received some correspondence. Mr. Foy, Tim Foy, the Deputy Director for Planning and Neighbor Services, has researched some of the correspondence. In case council members have any questions, he can answer those questions. I've also asked Laura Stotler, Principal Planner, most experienced with the Subdivision Map Act, to answer any technical questions on the subdivision issues that you may have.
Okay, thank you. All right, so to the general public that's here, the way we normally do this, we have the appellant speak first, and they can tell me how many minutes they need, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10, whatever it is that they need. Then the applicant will speak on his behalf or her behalf, and then the appellant is allowed to rebut. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, after the members of the public who want to speak, I would give both the appellant and the applicant the opportunity to rebut, giving the appellant the last opportunity because he or she has the burden.
Right. Okay, so after the applicant, after the appellant speaks, then the applicant speaks, then I'll go to the cards in kind of numerical order, the way it was handed to the clerk. Right, so who will be speaking on behalf of the appellant? Okay, we'll need your name for the record, and then about how long do you think you'll need? As much time as you want.
I really hope to limit to 15 minutes max, because I think the points are fairly simple, and if I will try not to run over.
Oh, that's fine, all right.
My name is Kurt Nelson. My address is 3 Corporate Plaza, Suite 100, Newport Beach, California. I'm the consultant for the appellants, who are the homeowners in the neighborhood. I was contacted because I formed their homeowners association with them back in the 1980s. I was one of the people with JCC Development at that time who purchased the 58 lots from First Interstate Bank. And we built most of the homes up there. I remembered pretty well, but I did a lot of research, and what I tried to do was go back and find the discussions from your predecessor's deliberations on the tract. The only thing that appears to be available at the planning and engineering departments were microfiche that were not legible. But I was able to bolster my pretty specific memories by going to the city clerk's office and getting the minutes of the council meetings in 74 through 79 concerning Tract 31888 and its offshoot parcel map 1355, of which 2116 is parcel C. Staff is correct. There's no violation of the Subdivision Map Act here, and at first glance, nearly 100,000 square feet is sufficient area to handle physically what's being proposed here. But it's got related problems. One is the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that encumber not just the appellant's lots, but they encumber 2116 Rimcrest, will be violated 8 ways from Sunday if this goes through. The CC&Rs were given to staff, multiple copies to the Planning Commission, but just to hit the highlights and understand that the Homeowners Association, which I understand has been inactive for quite some time, is there for organizational purposes to make enforcement easier, but any association member, of which you'll hear from a number of them here, can go to court and enforce these. The City of Glendale is not bound by the CC&Rs. That's absolutely true. But but you are also not bound to approve a subdivision that's bad planning and that's bad for your constituents. The CC&Rs that encumber all the affected properties, including the applicant, say that no lot, and a lot by definition in the CC&Rs includes 2116, can be used for any purpose other than a single-family residence. You can't add lots to the project. You cannot increase the number of homes there without a vote of the homeowners. It specifically prohibits, like most of our CCNRs, noxious and offensive activity, anything that can be an annoyance or a nuisance. I can't imagine a much bigger nuisance than watching what you were assured and what your governing instruments that are encumbrances on your lot guaranteed you when you bought the property than watching the landscaped hillside across the street get torn into multiple pieces and trucked out or compacted and whatever. All machinery and equipment is prohibited in the neighborhood unless it's obscured completely from adjoining lots. But the really important one, and the one that relates to the conditions of approval that were laid down by your predecessors, is that every owner of a lot, including 2116, is to maintain the appearance, the integrity, the ratio, the layout, and otherwise you're supposed to leave the slopes and the drainage swales and the irrigation system that's there to hold them in place, as is, where is, forever, in perpetuity. If you will direct staff to go into storage or wherever, there were 23 conditions of approval that were laid down on this tract, and they include, I assure you, those. In fact, the CCNR sections in Article 4 that deal with the enforcement of this restriction can't be changed without the consent of the Glendale Planning Department. There was no other reason to have a declaration of CCNRs and a homeowners association up there other than that had those kinds of things in them other than fulfillment of the conditions of approval. The tract was turned down in 1974. Then it came back in 75 at a special meeting and it was reconsidered, and after much objections from the Dearmont tract and others, it was approved after the council and staff decided that if the conditions of approval were adhered to, the environmental impact report that was certified could be certified and found that the substantial impacts to the environment that the citizens didn't want to see could be mitigated through imposition of these conditions of approval, which gave birth to a number of the CCNRs that this would violate. So, yes, at the Planning Commission, one of the commissioners asked a question and the answer was given, but it was not really I don't believe what he was asking. He said, well, are we bound by that? And the city attorney answered very accurately, no, we're not. It's between private party owners. That's true. But if you approve this as submitted, you will basically enable massive violations of the CCNRs that ironically were put down on Tract 31888 and then later on Parcel C of 1355, which is the applicant's property, that were deemed necessary to certify the environmental impact report. And the homeowners will go to court, and I work with and for, I'm a real estate broker, but I'm also a paralegal, and I work with and for a number of really good real estate attorneys, and every one of them says the same thing. Glendale's not bound, but if Glendale approves this subdivision and the homeowners seek an injunction, they'll get it. They'll spend a lot of money, the applicant will spend money, but I can't see how this is going to do anything but wind up in the courts and cost all parties money. In the end, I don't see how it can go forward. But let's say that's not the concern. If you review the city council records, particularly from 1979, after the city halted grading, the tract finally started up, and they came up with nearly 250,000 cubic yards of excess earth. Oops. So engineering halted the grading. They came back to the council, and the council said, what are you doing? Fill slopes are going up like 27 feet higher than your grading plan. Well, there were reasons. Development's not easy. And the long and the short of it was, there were a number of options presented, and the one that was deemed the one that would let the project go forward with a straight-faced compliance with CEQA and the conditions was that the applicant was ordered, the the developer, to lose about 5 lots. There were 12 lots in original recorded 31888 that were boundary lines were changed, lots were consolidated, and the 12 turned into 7 parcels, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yeah. And 4 of those are really large. The subject property at 2116 is the second largest by only a little bit. And it's the only one that when you look at it, you go, wow, Aspen Oak, you could do something here. But those lots exist in that size due to the developer promising to create these slopes. If you read the minutes, and they're public record, put in an irrigation system, drainage systems. The developer had to take care of it and make sure everything's taking root for 2 years, and it was to stay that way. Because those lots, if you look at that parcel map, if you don't know the history, you go, my God, that thing is huge. Well, there's a reason it's huge. 240,000 cubic yards of earth had to go somewhere, so things had to get moved around. I spent 20-some years mostly in front of bodies like this, including here, arguing on the other side of questions like this. And I'm not terribly comfortable doing this. I'm convinced that the applicant has, I don't think anybody knows the history of this. It's one of the consequences of getting so old now, is that I was there. Trust me, my company, if you could have subdivided those lots and put lots along Aspen Oak, trust me, we'd have done it, or tried. But it's inappropriate. It's simply, you can't always you can't do something just because it's physically possible. The people that are here tonight, way back in the 1980s, some of them bought from our predecessors. Most of them bought houses from us. I sat and went over the CC&Rs with these people when I helped them form their homeowners association. That they should have kept up going. But they, just like any of us, we buy a piece of property, get your title report, you look at things, you ask questions, and it says, oh, these things, this can't happen. I'm not going to enjoy I'm not going to have these happen. None of this can happen. So the bottom line is that if this project goes forward, there will be litigation, and I think that the applicant for the project will lose. But that's just my opinion, and the opinion of some really good real estate attorneys, including the man who wrote the Declaration of CC&Rs. I still talk to him, picked his brain to make sure my memory was accurate. But here, you not only have CC&Rs, you have CC&Rs that are written to preserve these slopes as they are now with the landscaping as a direct result of conditions of approval that the City of Glendale deemed necessary to certify the environmental impact report and approve the original development. And moreover, on top of that, the specific lot in question here is so large and further encumbered, if you see the minutes of the last meeting in 79, that, okay, you can do this, but you're going to plant it, you're going to irrigate it, and the owner of the lot is going to keep it that way. So while I take no issue with staff's report in terms of there's no violation of the Subdivision Map Act, not one that I know of, physically, the property is big enough to do it, and that fill slope has been there a long, long time, and it's served its purpose. It's landscaped, it drains correctly. To my knowledge, there's never been any massive slides down onto Aspen Oak. But the question isn't whether you can, it's whether you should, and it'll simply engender litigation, and I think based on how this all came about and what your predecessors decided when they approved it, I think it would be hugely inappropriate. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. How many minutes was that?
13.
13 minutes. All right, so now we have the applicant that can come to the podium. So you have 13 minutes, whether you take it yourself or you and the architects, however you want to break it up.
First off, I'm Christopher Gonzalez, attorney. I'm representing the landowner, and we have present the architect as well and the engineer. So if you have any questions for them, I'll try to get my time in. One of the very first telling things that was said is Mr. Nelson turned around and said to everyone that the CC&Rs he helped create. And he says, you should have kept them up. That homeowner association up there really doesn't exist. No one's up there doing anything to have meetings, to enforce it. It's more like selective processing. You pick a project and say, I don't like this one, so we're going to go after that homeowner or that landowner. Oh, we don't like this one. But there's no organization to the homeowner association. It's been there came to California in 1975, been practicing law for almost 20 years. I've watched this city grow from when that hillside was barren. And there's been nothing since the mid-'80s, when this went into play, to have a homeowner association or a meeting. It may have happened early, but no one's kept it up. Yet today they keep it up. The Planning Commission, your staff, your city, and like Mr. Nelson said, is correct. This is not an issue for you to decide in the CC&Rs, but I feel obligated to respond to them. And particularly with respect to, there's not one piece of language in the CC&Rs that would prevent this subdivision. You can look. It's pretty voluminous. And the reason I say that is that, ironically enough, and I'll give you some documentation I brought today, 6 of the 13 properties on Aspen Oak, there was a photograph up there across the street, are not actually part of the CC&Rs. There's a lot of, I believe, 13 pieces of land. 7 of them are part of the CC&Rs. 6 of them, including all of the complainants that are part of that 6, were to be annexed part of the CC&Rs, and were never annexed. Never made part of the CC&Rs at all. In fact, 2 of those individuals, one that is part of CC&Rs and one that is not, are currently in construction on Aspen Oak. And ironically enough, they've been doing it for several months. Trucks come up and down, making noise, making dust, and those 2 properties have no permits for the work they've been doing. 0. And they've been shut down. So I find it a bit ironic that you have many people complaining and pointing a finger, and 3 pointing right back at them. Building on the property, substantial building, making noise, making havoc, whatever you want to call their 2 issues of under the CEQA, yet no permits for the building, and have been shut down. There was a discussion earlier, Mr. Nelson brought up about his history, and he has much more history than I do as far as part of the project, but not as far as living in the city and understanding what's going on in the city. And at the beginning, if you look back, the very top of that property, there are 2 pieces of land that were owned by this city. They were intended to be a park with some tennis courts. And you may not even know that. And what ended up happening was, in time, the city said, we're going to get rid of those pieces of property. They sold them off in the early 90s to a private party. 2 years later, they were subdivided. This city, and possibly this council, approved that. And then 2 years after that, approximately in early mid-90s, they were built upon. I find that very important for you to understand that the city did exactly what they're trying to prevent it from doing with the property today. Approved it. Another aspect came up that a focus I hear that they keep saying in a common theme is this hillside, and it's such a massive piece of land. It must be for something other than what it was designed for, which was homes, possibly. I think the quote was, if we could build it or put it there, we would have put it there. Maybe you didn't think about it. Maybe you thought about it for a different purpose. And they're talking about this fill and this excess of land, where to place it. The applicant has submitted soil reports to this city, which have been reviewed. Non-issue. The burden is not on my client. The burden is on the appellants to provide evidence that this obvious, as they use it in the most recent documentation received today, if you haven't had a chance to use it, that's their term, obvious issue must have meant that they wanted it to be open and not developed. And I go back to that issue about obvious. I get the impression there that Mr. Nelson was attempting to maybe instill a little fear in the council as to his crystal ball that there's a group of lawyers out there that can somehow determine today that there will be a slam dunk decision made by a court if you do something here and there'll be litigation. My client has no problem with litigation if in case that's a concern for this committee, this council, I should say. Not that he wants it. He'd rather have you simply approve it and we'll deal with it from that point forward. But it's critical to understand that the two issues they bring up are CC&Rs, and they admit they're not relevant here. Yet he talked about it for about 11 of his 13 minutes. And the other portion he talked about for 2 minutes only was regarding the impact, the noise, the sound. We took this into consideration clearly, and we've made a determination and analysis that the amount of movement and time would be 10 to 14 days. Extremely temporary. Extremely temporary. On top of that, we've also been approached to have flexible times as to when to move the earth. And we're okay with it. But to have this belief that we're going to be trucking things in and day out and constantly moving earth for weeks on end is really not true. Not true at all. I want the council to really understand history is extremely important to me, as it is to the city, as it is to anything that we do, especially in these proceedings. And I'm a historian, if you'd like to look at it that way. And Mr. Nelson is probably one of the most historically knowledgeable person about this piece of land. I have no problem admitting that. But he's coming in a situation that the city, your city attorney, in fact, has even said, hey, the CC&Rs are something we should not be looking at. I say we, meaning the council. Has approved, have gone through all of their due diligence. They've gone through the cycles, the hours upon hours to do this. And they said, hey, it's a green light project, let's go. They've recommended to you to approve it, and I recommend to you as well to do. I'm leaving a few extra minutes in case you have any questions or if any of the architect or engineer would like to have any comments. So,
how many minutes was that?
Unless you want us to address some questions now or like to do them later.
5 minutes left. Well, there's 5 minutes left. You can...
Can you show us your model, the grading?
Sure.
Of course.
Go ahead.
May I? Okay. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Hamlet Zorabians. I'm the project architect. And obviously I have very few minutes left, and I cannot condense, a year and a half of due diligence that we've gone through. But just to answer the question as far as grading is concerned, if my paperwork can stay here for a while. Do you like to see models? We can turn it around.
Maybe you can...
Is it okay here? Or is it okay? I think camera can catch it.
Mr. Zarabian, I know what the average slope for the lot is, but what's the slope where the actual houses are going?
Where the actual houses are going?
Right, what's the slope in that section?
They're about 60%, 65% in lot 2, and in lot 3, it's a little bit more than that. It's about maybe 75% to 80. Yeah, and it depends on where exactly they're going. So as you're going towards the west side, the slope is much steeper, but when you're coming towards the east side of it, it's shallower.
And actually, we've designed the houses in the bottom of the slope, as you can see. So majority of the lot itself is going to stay. I mean, the slopes are going to be preserved. We're not going to touch anything there. And what you're seeing here in the model is just to our property line. From there, the slope continues all the way up as well. So this is one of the lots, and the other lot will come next to it. As far as the amount of the grading is concerned, it's been already tested. It was in the report. And it's very obvious if you calculate the number of trucks, the amount of grading that needs to be hauled away from there, the number of trucks, you can calculate it yourself. We've had this discussion during the Planning Commission.
I don't know if this is a question for you or for the city engineer, but there was some talk about this lot being, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure whether they were saying that this lot was used for fill, that fill was put on this lot.
Okay.
Can you explain that and what
Yeah, I
that
can
does
explain
to the sort of the stability of
course.
the lot itself?
Of course. Well, first of all, we've done two soils reports. And I can actually read off of these were both submitted, by the way, with their application, and it was reviewed. And I can, as you know, this is basically parcel C. So I'm going to read a statement from the soils engineering report. It's a preliminary soils engineering report. The proposed parcels are underlain by granitic bedrock, which is granite actually, bedrock, and it says parcel C, or certified compact field parcel A and B. What that means is that the soils in parcel C is underlain by bedrock. And two parcels that are to the north side of this property, they are compacted field certified. So if someone is coming and saying that what happened to that field, first of all, this happened in 75, since 1970s. I really cannot speak to that, what happened to the field. They might have taken it out of the property. They might have used it for other properties. But generally speaking, it's very obvious technically, and I think Mr. Weaver is an engineer himself, he knows. If there is a slope, when you come to cut the slope and create the access roadway, to normally cut from the upslope and then put it and create the downslope. So if there is any, generally speaking, fill that what created the other parcels, it will be the parcels below, which will be in the downslope after our property down. So I have two reports that speaks to that, and then at the end the conclusion is the preliminary analysis shows that the existing slope modified by the future development of proposed parcel C will be grossly stable with a factor of safety well in excess of 1.5. As a matter of fact, in some areas it's much difficult to dig into rather than, to think about how is it a fill or not. So there is a fill on the site. There might be some pockets of the fill. There will be some areas that there will be definitely fill over the bedrock. But as an architect and an engineer myself, if I would to speak to that, I would say it's much better to get rid of, if there is any pockets of fill, and substitute it with a nice foundation which will be strengthening underneath the slope, and then actually it will improve the stability of the slope. So those are the things I can speak to, but generally it's a very vast question, and analysis, will be more than an hour if we speak to. But those are the simple comments I can make.
Mr. Weaver?
Would you say for the most part that is a cut slope?
Most part, yes.
Okay. And on the side where the homes are, there could be some compacted fill in there?
There could be.
Could be. And when you fracture, decompose granite, break it down and recompact it, does it expand? Volume expand?
Well, I can't speak to that because I'm not a geological engineer.
I know
have
from
to
other
rely.
experiences that it expands, so you have more left over than when you take it out.
That is true.
That accommodates
Could
for
be.
some of it.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Manuki.
I have questions from staff, actually. There were some comments made that I want to clarify. First one was the additional properties that were sold by the city. Are we aware of that? and they were subdivided in the vicinity. Is that correct?
Yes, today, actually, staff since yesterday did some research on that, and in fact, there were some properties dedicated for a park, as was mentioned, that the city later decided to sell.
Know where that is?
Yes, it's on the...
I have a map here.
We have a map as well.
Brad, can you show that on your slide by any chance?
I'm sorry, maybe we can go through the speakers and go through all questions.
Okay,
today,
well,
just because we're going to...
if you can get back to me on this question before I make the final decision. The second question is, the speaker made a comment regarding illegal construction that was being done on that street. I would like, and that was shut down, I would like some documentation on that as well before I consider it.
I saw it today.
The addresses are 114
was shut down?
Aspenoke and
Saw
one.
it?
I saw some work, but no activity was going on today.
Okay.
The addresses are 114 Aspenoke.
If you could give it to the staff,
Sure.
I would appreciate
No problem.
it. So
Also,
we can
we-
get the process moving.
Yeah, you also have a photographs of the trucks and every equipment that is.
Yeah, please pass it to the staff.
Okay, now we're going to go to the general public. Going to start with David Kaplan, followed by Charles Santos. And we'll have, the general speakers are going to have 3 minutes apiece.
Could I have a few more minutes because I've been involved since 1976 with this project. I worked with Ernest Auerbach.
Well, you are speaking on your own behalf? Or?
Well, actually a consultant for the complainants.
For the people that appealed?
Appealed, yeah. Because
Well,
I'm not being paid, but I know the complete history of this track.
Yeah.
I worked for Ernest Auerbach from '76.
Well, you should have taken part of the first 15 minutes, actually. I'll let you speak 3 minutes, and then if there's questions from the city council, we'll let you proceed.
Right.
Because everyone has to be given the same...
I understand.
Yeah. So... All right, we can do that. What's your name? Okay, so then we'll add, we'll give you 6 minutes. Well, that's all, he says he's going to need is 6 minutes, so you have 6 minutes.
Okay. Like I said, I've been involved with this track from '76 on. I worked for Ernest Auerbach and his company. I was involved when we had to change the grading plan and add the 240,000 square feet of fill. And one of the original points when the track was being built was the city council and the planning department both had a concern with keeping the ridge line looking natural. It was really important. And what they think of as just vacant land, we think of as part of a natural looking slope. That's one reason we had to plant it for natural looking slope. We had meetings and meetings and meetings, including this going over the original CCNRs with the planning department to show them what we're going to do. Because we want to work with the city. We wanted to cooperate, and we did. We went to after JCC bought, I think it was 4 lots, we did come back again and see if we could just at least plant some of the slopes above on this lot. And they told us, no, it's an engineered slope. You're going to destabilize it. And we said, well, we understand. We built it. We can understand it could destabilize it. We don't want to do damage to it. We want to leave it as is. Everybody told us from 80 all the way to 87, you cannot touch it, you cannot grade it, you cannot landscape it. I mean, this is planning people for, 7 years we did this with. We talked to city councilmen. Security Pacific Bank got involved because they were the ones lending on the property. And all of a sudden, you want to take natural hillside, what we made into natural hillside, even though it's engineered slopes, which aren't as stable as natural hillside, and cut into it and take the ridge line and change it essentially. When you look up at the development, you see this nice big green space. Well, now you're going to see this green space with 2 additional houses that were never planned. And believe me, Ernest Auerbach wanted to get more lots than he got. He had to give up 5 lots in 79 when he had to change the grading. JCC, we tried several times to do some lot splits. They wouldn't even let us do lot line adjustments, because we wanted to give the land in front of the people that are on Aspen Oak about 15 feet of the hill above, because that's what they look at. And we were turned down time after time after time, every time we talked to somebody in planning. That is not going to happen. You are not going to touch these. You are not going to change anything. This is, and I'll use the 2 words that city council people used last time, you're basically desecrating and scarring what's a nice natural looking slope. There's no reason to do it. Matter of fact, the reason not to do it is, if anything, you would destabilize it. And anybody that says when you cut into an engineered slope and you build something, you're adding stability, I don't understand that. I've been helping developers for 30 years. I've been involved with over 1,200 hillside homes. And I've never heard that argument yet. Not once. I worked for MJ Peters. I worked for CPH. You don't touch engineered slopes. And for me, that's one of my big concerns. And when we want to give the people 10 feet, we were only going to give them enough room to do some nice planting. There was no talk about actually cutting into slopes. Matter of fact, even when we, like I said, just said trees, they said, no, not on an engineered slope. And it seems like he knows history, but he has not gone back far enough to see what the complete history was and what the intent of the developer was and what the intent of the city council was. This is going against everything we were told by previous city councils, I think 3 of them, and planning department for 7 years, 8 years, and all of a sudden they're trying to make it into a new ball game. I mean, just because time's passed, it doesn't change what the previous councils wanted and the people on Dearmont wanted. We worked with the local associations in the area. They didn't want this type of thing in their hills. And, I mean, it took a lot of negotiation, and our back ended up with a lot less lots than they expected. And when we went even to make minor changes of lot lines, it wasn't allowed. And now all of a sudden they're subdividing? I mean, it's kind of an extreme change from what we were told originally. And I don't think it will help the area at all. If anything, you're going to take it, like I said, a nice green area and plop 2 houses on it. Now, looking down from the city, when you look up there, you'll see that green spot. Now you'll see the green spot with 2 houses. I don't think that improves the city. And it certainly changes the look of the ridgeline. And the ridgeline, that was so important. I mean, we suffered in here weeks after weeks going over that. And now they sort of dismiss it as not even important. If you have any questions, you can ask me. I was there for a long time.
Questions? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Charles Santos, followed by Steve Iskandarian.
Good evening, council members. My name is Charles Santos. I'm a planner. I'm here on behalf of several homeowners on Aspen Oak Lane. In addition to the comments raised about the CCNRs and the history of the project, just want to discuss a little more about the steepness of these properties, the grading. I believe the architect mentioned that the slopes are 65 to 75%. Those are extremely steep slopes, which leads to the amount of grading on this project. 2,500 cubic yards of grading. I've estimated 250 to over 300 truck trips. I don't believe this is the kind of project where you're going to have a short window for construction. It's a hillside. It'll be a lot of excavation, caissons, retaining walls. It'll be months of work. And in my opinion, and in the neighbor's opinion, the project, it benefits the applicant who has a home already at 2116 Roomcrest. And the people who suffer are the owners of Aspen Oak Lane and neighbors down below who will be dodging dump trucks and equipment. Just think if you lived on Aspen Oak Lane, how you would feel if a project like this was to take place on your street, and the impacts it would have on you, your family, and just your well-being. Furthermore, as Kurt Nelson mentioned, he's done a lot of research, and I applaud him for the effort he's put in to look at the history of the tracks. It's easy to forget what other commissions and what went on in the past, but it is important to note that there were 23 conditions of approval. I don't know what they are. I haven't seen them. I think they would be important to review and look at, and I believe that if this project is approved, it will undo that City Council's effort to limit the amount of development that went on up in this area, to make sure that the slopes were landscaped and irrigated and taken care of, and that the community was built at one time at a certain density, and move on. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Iskandarian, followed by Nalish Desai.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. My name is Steve Iskandarian. Thank you for having us here and hearing us out. Thank you for your time and dedication to our community. My family and I have lived in Glendale on Aspen Oak Lane for almost 30 years now. We currently own and operate 2 restaurants in Glendale, both of which are Zanku Chicken. I believe that I share a common goal with all of you on the panel today, and that is that I take pride in helping our community. Believe me when I say that I feel a certain gratification when I know that because of our hard work, we help make our community better by providing a place people can get high-quality food at a reasonable price in a timely and hospitable manner. You, on the other hand, serve the community in a much more grand scale. I'm honored to stand before you today. I would also like to say that I'm happy, but I can't because I'm not happy. I'm shocked that this project made it this far. I feel like this whole project is one bad joke that won't go away. A bad joke that is cleverly camouflaged with the most highly connected architects, engineers, and definitely the most highly connected real estate agent in Glendale, Mr. Bonyadi. We are talking about massive digging and massive construction to erect 2 homes which will forever hover over our entire block. That's why this is different. This is not like the Americana project, where the pros and cons are weighed out. This is not the empty lot at the end of the block that makes people wonder what the developer is waiting for. Aspen Oak Lane for over 30 years has had homes only on one side of the street. That's why this is different. If this thing is approved, then every time I step out the door of my house, I'm going to think about Mr. Bonyadi because I'm going to see those homes. I don't want to have to look to my right. Sorry, I don't have to look to my right. I don't have to look to my left. All I have to do is walk out of my house, and I'm going to be forced to think about this man. And I don't want to think about Mr. Bonyadi anymore. I've thought of him enough. This thing is just too one-sided to get approved. It's good for him and his bank account, and it's detrimental, and I mean detrimental to us who live on Aspen Oak Lane. This thing will be catastrophic to our very core. Our morale will be devastated. Ladies and gentlemen, with every decision you make, you apply a common wisdom and you put things on a scale and you say, here are all the ways that this is good and here are all the ways that this is bad. Well, please allow me to give you one version here. This is good for him and for his money, and it's not good for us at all.
You have to wrap it up.
I want to say thank you for thinking about us here, and I beg you to do something that Mr. Bognati is not doing. I want you to consider your fellow man, and please protect us from this project happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Desai, followed by, I believe it's Lynn LeMay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, council member, honorable mayor. My name is Nilesh Desai. I'm a physician living in 132 Aspen Oak Lane for the last 30 years. I bought my house from David Kaplan, who was here before. He knows the history. When we bought this house, we were told that Aspen Oak will stay just the way it is. There will be no more houses coming opposite to us. And we paid premium price for that. We have been living this for 30 years in peace and harmony. Everybody knows each other. We don't want this project. We are outraged, not just the health, environmental, noise impact, but as mentioned earlier, this is an engineered hill. You are changing it forever. We went through a lot of discussion and agonizing, and city had the lots on the top, which unfortunately was sold out. It was a park and recreation and 2 tennis court proposed. But at that time also, city took the considerations of the homeowners. They said that we do not want the park over here because it will create more traffic, more noise. So here we are today urging you not to allow this development because it affects us directly. If you go back to the days of 1975 and 1980s, as mentioned earlier, 240,000 cubic yards of dirt was cut and laid right across in our front. The city mandated that we put the sprinkler system, irrigate, and drain. And once the developer was gone, we, each homeowner, were irrigating and putting pipe right across from our house, and those cypress trees you see, they were 1 foot tall. If none of you have been there, I suggest you be there, look at it, and then see if you are living there. Would you agree for this project or not? If you doubt that any of above contentions are true, then please direct staff to obtain the clear copy of 23 conditions of approval laid down for the track 31888 and have engineering department review the parcel map 1355A records, which along with applicant's own submittal should show the massive amount of fill that made up much of the area of 2116 Rimcrest Drive. Just because he can, he shouldn't. He should be concerned about all the neighbors in that area. This is one person's gain at the cost of 20 or 100 others that will be affected by this massive project. Thank you for giving me a time.
Thank you. Lynn LeMay.
I make it quick. I'm also a physician. I live in this neighbor more than 15 years, 10 or 15 years. But my concern is our neighbor street now is a lot of young family and children. And for me, just a physician standpoint, that does create a neighbor, the inherit to the lung concern what the future children. That's my concern. I think the house for that neighbor, the other issue, I'm not familiar. But for me, it's a healthy concern. So I want to put all the picture together, like. Just, I think if it's a new, it's a property that nobody starts set up the ground or build like as many as a house together would be a good idea to have more land to developing and more family have more new house. But I think already settled down, family, like many house already there is a peace environment and it create a big project. I think it's kind of like don't put just the wrong time and the wrong place. I think if the beginning set up well with a good plan for the city and for everybody. My concern is just a healthy, the dust. It cannot. Sometimes when they're out in the air, it's a whole city and it's a hillside, and they're going to go down the whole big many house got affected. I was there in the McGinn place but I think also maybe the truck driving and also the air going to just go everywhere. That's my concern. Thank you for all
Give
the
us your
thought.
name for the record, doctor. Your name?
My name is Lynn Lamay. I'm a neurologist. I'm a physician.
No, that's good. Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, that's, those are the speakers from the general public. So now we have the appellant. Oh, you have a card? Okay, turn it in. Anyone else want to speak on this item? All right, we're going to close the public, or we're not going to allow any more cards after this lady.
Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Helena Artunian, and I'm a neighbor 130 at Aspen Oak. We've been living there for 2 years, and we're a young family. I have 2 kids, 3 years old and 5 years old. As the physician was just speaking, it's not about what is legally the right thing to do, but it's morally what is the right thing to do. As a human being, and as a person of living in Glendale, I would hope that you consider the health, you consider the safety, you consider just the humanity versus just what's legally right and wrong. Yes, it may legally be right for him to build it, but is it going to really help everybody or the community, or is it going to hurt the community? There's so many people opposed to this because it's not just, we would love to see our Glendale bloom and be beautiful. Who wouldn't? We would like to see jobs being created. We would like to see all these things happen. But if the cons and pros are just not balancing, then we have to consider what's right, humanly right. I have 2 kids that are playing in the backyard, and if those trucks, God forbid, ever something happens to my kids, then who's going to be liable? These are safety issues. Yes, as a mom, I will be there, but I don't have to be concerned about this at this point. And it's not about what's black and white. It's also that we need to consider the gray, what's right, just humanly right. If you don't know where we are, you can just take a drive and you'll know what we're talking about. All the neighbors, most of them are young families. We have at least 6 kids under the age of 7 running around and playing in the backyard. Not necessarily where the hill is, where the pools are, but in the back where the construction will be, happening, and the trucks and all. I just don't want to think about it. And not even the fact that the dust and the pollution and if my kids have asthma, if they have all these things that are going to be pushed and they're going to be aggregated, who's going to pay for this? I will truthfully go all the way with this if this is approved, because this is just not right. It's not about what he can physically do. It's about what's right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have the appellant that can speak if they...
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask, are you going to let the applicant speak as well?
Yeah.
Okay, I would let them go first, because, again, the burden is on
Okay, so the applicant should go first.
Right.
All right, we'll have the applicant speak first, followed by the appellant.
Mayor, allotment time.
How long do you think you'll need, Helen?
Just a few minutes. I'd like to just, in closing, address a few of the concerns that I saw.
5, let's say?
5 is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it might not even take that much. There are a few, by the way, for the record, my name is Hamlet Zorabians. I'm the project architect. And I'm just going to briefly address a few of the concerns that was raised. And we've gone through all these studies, like I said, in a year and a half, and planning department and all the combined department and staff were helping us out with studies and questions and due diligence, and we were going back and forth. So one concern was raised by Councilman Friedman, which I just want to also mention concerning that. You mentioned the slope. What was the slope on that? Obviously, the reason that we went through the Planning Commission was that because we were above 20% slope, and there's no denying that this is a slope lot. But throughout the history of Glendale and any other city, when the project is designed right and project is designed sensitively to the slope, and according to the ordinances, the guidelines that is already placed, they're very successful and they're built. And I have I had five examples of them throughout the last at least 6 years. And 3 of them, which was approved and yet later on constructed, I just want to just give you the addresses and we can check it out. This is a project which, case in point, 1650 Hasbet Lane, which was, over 50% slope. And we have another project as an example, 1017 Cumberland Road, which was on the slope again, more than 50%, which was approved July of 2011. And then we had another project as well here, which is, trying to find the address for you here, but it's in the reports. A second. This one was on 660 Bowling Road, which was approved, conditional use permit, and actually it was built with not much of an impact. As far as some of the questions that was raised about how long this grading is going to take and so on, so it's pretty simple. In the report, it was stated that lots 2 and 3, they will generate 1,790 cubic yard of cut, 1,587 cubic yard for lot 3. And some of that will be filled, some of them will be balanced. But if you subtract and take the worst condition, we're talking about total of 1,368 cubic yard for lot 2 and 1,177 for lot 3. Now the trucks are 14 cubic yard each. If you divide, into the amount of grading that is going to be exported, and this is, I'm taking the worst case without balancing it, we're talking about 182 trucks. The 182 trucks, and I'm myself in construction as well, and we coordinated it, and 5 trucks 4 times a day makes it into a 20 load a day. So 20 load a day, if you divide it, it becomes a 9 working day if we keep it up with a 20 load a day. So just the grading portion of it, as far as taking the soil out, it can take not more than 2 weeks, maybe the most 3 weeks. It depends on the frequency of what we are doing. So obviously we're not planning to be nuisance to our neighbors. I mean, we're going to be living there, and my client actually is building these 2 houses for his own children. And for that, I just want to say that I'm sorry, I lost the train of my thought because of the comment. And this is what I was going to say. That Planning Commission also was entertaining to make recommendations to restrict the hours of operation, and we're okay with that. If we adhere to the same recommendations, it can start. Actually, work can start after 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, where everyone is at to work, to minimize. But all in all the environmental impact report is there. You have a copy of it. There was no significant impact to the neighborhood, and it's all there. I'm not going to go through it. And there was another issue. I think some people showed some sentiment as far as the existing trees below the grade. And I just want to mention that we're not proposing to cut all those trees there. I mean, our landscape plan that we have that was submitted, most of the trees will be remaining. There are only the trees that are in front of the driveway, and certain areas strategically that needs to be removed. But other than that, we have a comprehensive landscaping plan. As you can see, that was submitted, and heavily we're going to be landscaping around the building. And as you are aware of it, it's not only that. Fire department requires a certain amount of clearance around the building for the fire hazard requirements. So that is also worked out in the landscape plan. So I just wanted to let you know that we are very sensitive as far as this project is concerned. We've been working very hard and very closely with the staff to make sure that we've taken any precaution necessary. So that's it. I just, if you have any other questions, I can address. Otherwise, that was just my comments to make.
Okay. How many minutes?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. How many minutes, Mr. Collins? About 6 minutes. All right. So now the appellant has up to 6 minutes to speak.
Thank you. First of all, just not to get sidetracked, please don't get sidetracked. HOA, I'm not as funny as I think I am sometimes. I turn around and scold them about the HOA because I set it up when I was a small boy. It's not relevant to the enforcement of the CC&Rs. It's well-settled case law, and the declaration states specifically in more than one place that any individual owner can enforce the declaration through any means at equity or at law, and they will recover attorney's fees. HOA active, inactive is irrelevant. And by the way, the last lady who spoke eloquently and said she was going to go all the way is a member of the association. And there are many who oppose this. Speaking to the few people on Aspen Oak who were not annexed into the Homeowners Association, they still have a right to rely in good faith on what they were told. And when we, and my company was involved by that time, and Mr. Kaplan was selling for us, when we built their house, they asked about that, and we asked the city, and the city said emphatically no. Based on that, they bought their home. They have plenty of neighbors who are encumbered by the CC&Rs and have the legal standing to enforce them. To compare somebody with or without a permit, I don't know, who's doing some remodeling on his house with subdividing and building and grading is ludicrous. And as long as we're talking about irony, what is extremely ironic is that if you, and please, I don't know if you've had time, I know we couldn't find the papers until fairly recently, please read the minutes from 1975 and then in 78 and 79. This isn't speculation, it's all right there. When this tract was approved, it was stated in the findings that if the 23 conditions of approval were adhered to, there would not be a significant negative impact on the environment, and that's how the EIR got certified. Go forward then and read what happened to the 240,000 cubic yards of excess fill. I'm not speculating about the stability. That isn't my point. They got a great architect. It's good work. The point isn't that the hillside, to me, I don't know one way or another whether it's going to affect the stability. The point is it's wrong. The CC&Rs, to say that there's not one word, read them, there's plenty to go around. Can't increase the number of lots, can't do anything that's obnoxious or annoys your neighbors, can't have equipment that isn't screened, got to have please. At the end of the day, it is probably physically a feasible development. You have to decide based on what the neighbors' concerns are and the fact that this will wind up in litigation, and people that have spent a lot of money are going to spend more money, and whatever it's worth, I think they're going to lose. But that's not the point. You get to decide, and if nothing else, if you don't believe what Mr. Kaplan and I are telling you, please get a hold of those conditions of approval. Look at the original grading plans and read the minutes. That lot is huge for a reason. And the reason was not to let it be split and built upon in the future. All I have.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Quintero, before you close the
Sure.
public hearing, with your permission, the staff report was very good in summing up the findings of the Planning Commission granting approval, but there was one dissenting planning commissioner, and that analysis was not included in the staff report to that extent. With your permission, I would like to ask that planning commissioner to give us her rationale for voting against the project. Would you allow that?
That's fine. Who is it?
Ms. Langergan? Do you need her to fill a card out after?
Yeah, she'd have to fill a card out afterwards. Ms. Langergan, how long do you think it'll take to make your point?
No more than 5 minutes. Probably
More
shorter.
than what? 5?
No more than 5, probably shorter.
Okay, so we'll give her 5. And give us your name for the record and also your position.
Stephanie Landrigan, Chair of the Glendale Planning Commission. When I was looking at the plan here, I had received not a model, so I had the grading plans, and when I looked at it, I had concerns, first of all, about the slope. I drove to the site, and I looked at this one lot, and I had actually spoken with the city engineer, and I said, I think that's an 80% slope. And we talked then that the slope that comes about and is used for calculations is an average slope. And it's done on an interesting calculation in which we discussed and I understood. And so technically everything in the grading plan meets the intent of the code. But what my concern was is that a parcel map, and there are many parcels that we see that look very steep and were decided long before. And when we put the hillside ordinance into place, it was my understanding that we didn't have to create those kind of unreasonable situations again through the Subdivision Map Act. So I looked at this, and based upon the fact that it was truly an 80% slope, and I can show you here to here is an 80% slope, even though the average slope is less. So it meets the intent of the code. The tentative tract map and parcel maps are made for flat properties. And when you take them with the hillside ordinance and you put them together, and you realize that once the parcel map is approved, the hillside ordinance doesn't apply anymore. The next governing body is the Design Review Board. So to me, what the Planning Commission needed to do was to see if we could make sure that the site planning, and that's what the parcel map shows, was best done. So I asked in our first session if the applicant would come back and look at it, because I felt that it could hold one house, but I felt 2 houses was not an appropriate use based upon the topography. They came back with the same plan and said that this was the best plan. And I think I have been quoted numerous times, but I said, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And to me, when I looked at this property, I felt that the slope of this property and the intent of the parcel map and tentative tract map restrictions did not lead me to a vote of approval. I believe that one house would be very appropriate, and if this was subdividable, that would be the best solution. But I felt that 2 was inappropriate specifically because of the slope. That was the reason for my decision. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Mnuchin.
What do you mean by saying that the tentative tract map and the parcel map were made for flat properties? What do you mean?
Well, when you do a subdivision
does
map...
that mean that it doesn't apply to a hillside property?
Well, that means that when we say that if you have 3,000 square feet that you need to have minimum of each parcel, and that you can place it within a certain square footage, that calculation doesn't take into account the topography of the land. That takes into account, that's what the tentative tract map does.
But your statement is not correct. Tentative tract map is not only made for flat lands. Is that correct?
No, it's
okay. That's what I wanted to clarify.
Correct.
Because you made the statement saying that tentative tract map and the parcel map were made for flat areas, and they're not. As far as topography, I understand your point regarding the topography, but the parcel maps and the tract maps were made for any property to be used, right?
They are, but they are applied they are applied to both flat and to hillsides and I'm sorry if I misspoke, Mr. Manukian, thank you for that. But I was saying that other layers of planning need to be applied to it so that you can make that.
That I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. Are we ready for comments?
Well, I have questions.
Oh, okay, then let's continue the questions.
Several times, the applicants have discussed the 23 conditions that were placed on this upon its initial subdivision. I don't have those in front of me. Do we have those? I think that's important for council to have before we come to any sort of discussion or conclusion.
Staff is producing them right now for you.
Do you think, as planning director, that that's something? I know there was a lot of late in the game research going on. Do you think that's something relevant and pertinent that we should be reviewing before we make a decision on this?
I think it is. Every piece of information could be relative and pertinent based on the council's desire. In this case, I must say that it is not uncommon for planning review to look at something under today's circumstances, today's regulations, and not always rely on the original regulations. In that sense, it is really ultimately a policy decision on part of the council to consider those or not.
I'm sorry, but I beg.
Microphone.
It's not the regulations
It's the conditions
It's
that
the
you-
conditions for the
That's-
property. So it's not the regulations. Do the conditions apply today? And that is the question
And
that Mr. Najarian is asking.
I do not know. Let me just
Okay.
take it,
All right.
consult with my staff.
If I may, just chime in here. Usually with conditions that are imposed on a map, they're usually imposed at the tentative map stage. And what happens is, at the time you go for the final map, the applicant developer usually has to comply with those or provide some agreement that they're going to comply with those, provide a bond, and that may have been what happened here. At some point, they got their final map, and those conditions were probably satisfied, or they had an agreement. Maybe the CCNRs, in some instances, were going to substitute for compliance at the time they got their final map. And so that's usually why, with the older subdivisions, you don't see the conditions as part of the initial planning review, because they're looking at it under today's standards.
Do the deeds on any of these properties refer to the conditions set forth in the?
I can't say, but I doubt it. They probably refer to the CCNRs only. But again, I can't say for sure.
So let me just sort of get this straight. There were conditions placed on the tentative. You're saying that upon the creation of the homeowners association, upon the creation of, well, the CCNRs are made part of your deed.
It's part of the final map. They have to show, before the council could approve the final map, whenever it was approved,
So for the completion of the property, the conditions must have been met. That's what you're saying.
either met or there must have been an agreement, either sometimes secured by a bond, sometimes not, to show that they were going to comply with them at some later date.
Does a homeowner, one of the things we heard is that people that bought the property on Aspen Oak relied on those CCNRs and the representations that other hillside would not be built upon. Do they have a detrimental reliance issue against the city for changing? Assuming we change conditions or permit homes, can they come to us and say, look, I bought this, there was going to be no home there, now you, city, changed it, my home is devalued, whatever.
In terms of liability, we wouldn't have liability for, the law is pretty clear that we can't have liability for approving a subdivision, and in addition, there's immunities. Now, there might be some, if there was an actual condition, like if this were a CUP and the condition was still in place, then arguably a property owner could come and say to the city, you have to comply with this condition. But again, not knowing the particular circumstances of these conditions, I can't say 100% that that's the case.
I think, unless the council has a chance to read those conditions, I don't think we should be taking any action tonight, personally. That's just my opinion, because who knows what those conditions might say. They may say what the applicants believe. They may be contrary to what the applicants believe. And in my mind, that has some weight to it as to what the initial council imposed on this development.
I agree with you.
Wait, you use the term applicant, you mean appellant, right?
Yeah, it was
I'm
the
sorry.
appellant.
Well,
It was
I
mostly
mean,
the
both
appellant.
sides are sort of implying that there's some force to these conditions. I'd like to know myself.
Well, has
what they
staff
say.
reviewed them? Can they give us a report right now on what?
I don't
they-
know. It sounds like, because again,
Because we received them. I received them a few days ago and asked you.
Correct.
Sent you an email and said, because they were emailed to all of us.
well, not the conditions, only the minutes from prior meetings.
Well, the minutes. So even that, when I sent that to you, were you able to take a look at that and see if the council did themselves put conditions on this? I'm not talking about the CCNR now. I'm talking about that council meeting where they were debating this.
23
Did you have
conditions,
time
yeah.
to look at that?
We looked, yeah, and we both looked at those, the minutes, and they do somewhat comport with the explanation provided by the appellant in terms of there was overgrading, the parcel map that created this parcel was sort of fixed to address some of those overgrading issues. Nothing specific to these. This was the condition that had to be satisfied to have the project comply with the environmental review. I would say I agree with Mr. Agani to the extent that I think these conditions will have some relevance. How much, I think, is a policy call for the council to decide. Do we want to delay this and have these made part of the record, and then have the opportunity to look at them, or can staff provide an explanation of what they said now and decide how much weight you want to put to those.
So bottom line, you haven't been able to really review
No.
yet all of those conditions to report back to us as to what the conditions were. Although I understand that you're also saying that may not be relevant to our deliberations, but it could be. That's up to us.
Correct.
Let me ask you just a few other questions. First of all, have you looked at the CCNR? Have you had a chance to?
We've reviewed them. I mean, I've reviewed them. They're part of the packet, so I did look. I did try to find relevant information.
Okay, so two questions. First question, would the CCNR, and I understand we are not in a position we don't have to enforce the CCNR, but would the CCNR strictly applied prohibit developing these lots?
I don't know. I looked at them, and I think it's an interesting legal case that may occur between the applicant and the appellants. I don't think it's a slam dunk for either one. And I mean, other than that, I can't really speak to it.
And what's in the CCNR that the appellant believes would prohibit developing these lots?
I don't know for sure, but from what I understand is it's essentially creating additional lots that are not part of the subdivision, and that requires their position is that requires a two-thirds vote of the existing homeowners.
So let me ask you this. I understand that we don't have to take the CCNR into consideration. And I understand the legal reasons. There's a lot of CCNRs that have really crazy things in them from many years ago that you certainly would never want to be in a position of enforcing. But can we decide based on the CCNR? Can we take that into consideration?
The primary focus should be on whether or not the subdivision complies with the findings that are required to approve a subdivision, whether it complies with the Glendale Municipal Code.
What are those findings?
The primary finding is whether or not the parcel map provides appropriate street and alley dedications or fails to provide lot sizes, design, or configurations which closely conform to the contiguous or nearby lots of the neighborhood, or results in a reorientation of a lot or parcel in such a manner as to be detrimental to adjoining properties or the surrounding neighborhood. That's the exact language that's in the Title 16 of the code.
Your opinion, does it apply?
I can't give an opinion.
Your legal opinion?
I could give you an opinion that if you make those findings, I think there's enough evidence to support them either way.
So if we were to continue this, to receive that information that we haven't really, or to have staff review that information, would that be germane enough new information to have to reopen the hearing, or can we just continue it with no more public comment?
You probably would have to limit the comment to just that particular issue of what's in the conditions, and not have to reopen the entirety of the hearing.
Meaning that anyone who wants to speak could speak on that, though?
Correct. I mean, to be safe. But again, it was presented prior to the hearing. I think everybody's had an opportunity to comment on the conditions. Most pertinently, the appellant and the applicant, they've both spoken to it to some degree. So again, I don't think anybody's overly prejudiced by not continuing it. I mean, by not allowing additional public testimony.
Another question, if no one else has one. This is a different subject, but for Mr. Hagani. Can you explain to me what the point of the hillside guideline with the average slope is if you can still build on extreme slopes that are 80%, 75%? I mean, why have an average slope at all if you can still, I mean, was the intent originally of the hillside guidelines to stop development on extremely steep slopes? And if not, why even have a percentage in there? And if so, why do we allow building on this kind of slope?
I think that's a very complicated question. What the original intent was, I think there are people on this dais that probably were involved in the creation of those regulations and can answer that better than I could. However, the fact is that there are means through which an applicant can apply to build on steeper lots, and the mechanism is provided in the zoning code. Whether or not they can be approved every time is a question of the review authority's discretion at any given time.
But would that go through this review, or once we approve this, there's no more review for slope, right? I mean, that's it.
No, they need a CUP.
Would need a CUP.
They would
Still a CUP, and that is really exactly what I'm referring to.
And under what condition would the CUP be denied based on the slope?
I would have to refer to my zoning code right now to make references to that, but that is essentially the authority of the hearing authority at the time when they apply prior to going to DRB as
Because
well.
if it's in the CUP, I mean, it's going to be according to code or not according to code. So is this going to be considered to be zoning compliant? We should know that now, right?
No, we can't, because essentially the CUP process itself will be the process through which that will be determined.
So that's a
And that'll require its own hearing at the time that they
That's
apply.
discretionary
That's a
approval?
discretionary review process. Correct.
Okay, I understand.
Mr. Manukian.
The issue of the environmental impact report, the comment was made that there were some conditions for the initial approval of the environmental impact report. My question is, were those conditions reviewed when you considered the neg deck, or not you, but your department considered the neg deck for this project?
Yes, I actually had that conversation with staff earlier today, and the way that staff responded to me was that the initial environmental review was done for the entire subdivision, which included, a lot of grading and for all of the lots that were created at the same time. In comparison to the original environmental review and the conditions which were put upon the subdivision itself, the entire subdivision itself, the review for these two additional lots is actually de minimis, and the impact that you're looking at in comparison to that is really a small piece that would not necessarily be subject to the same level of discretion and the same level of review. Furthermore, at the time that this original subdivision was done, the way the conditions and the level of environmental review that was customary was by far more permissive. And I can tell you that most probably the same subdivision would not be approved under not only our new regulations, but also under the way that we relate to CEQA today. So when you put that in that context, then the two subdivisions alone will not really necessarily have any much of a relationship with the original conditions and the mitigation measures in the environmental review.
And this property owner to even start considering building any property, any houses on these lots, they would have to go through a hearing, as we were mentioning before, a CUP hearing.
Correct.
Which is where the slope would be taken into consideration. When we're dealing with subdivisions, do we take into consideration the slope, the slope, the percent of the slope in any way, shape, or form? Is that part of the? Is that part of the
lot design?
To the extent that you look at the pad, you have to have the pad identified, and the pad for the houses.
Okay.
And in this particular application, they have.
But how does that play into the subdivision? When you read the description of the Subdivision Act, it did not say is a slope over 50%. It does say it in the Hillside Ordinance, but not the Subdivision Act.
Well, a couple of factors, Mr. Manukian. One is that was one of the main finding.
Okay.
There are other findings in accordance with the code and the Subdivision Map Act, lot size and configuration. Typically we do consider slope.
Slope of the property?
Yeah. Although it's something that obviously can be part of the CUP process if the council wants to.
Well, it is part of the CUP process,
Right.
but the question is it part of the Subdivision Map Act process based on what you have there?
I think our view is collectively is yes. I mean, to the extent that you've got to conclude that the design of the lot is consistent with the neighborhood, won't cause environmental impacts, that the site, the location of the pad doesn't require excessive grading. Those types of things are all taken into consideration. I don't think the subdivision standard specifically mentions slope, but slope impacts all those other findings that you have to make.
All right, the additional, yes. Go
I need to
ahead.
retract something that I said earlier because Ms. Stotler just discovered this exception in the code that the CUP shall not apply to lots which have been created by a tract map or a parcel map given tentative tract map approval after April 15, 1993. In other words, in this particular case, the CUP would not be required. And this is just a little-known exception in the code that Ms. Stotler just aptly identified.
Which I didn't know. Only DRB? Okay. My initial questions about the two lots that were, could you tell us about the history of that? Because I looked on Google Maps and it looks like
the history was exactly
very
as-
large two properties that were built on those two lots.
The history, based on what staff discovered this morning, is exactly as the applicant outlined, that the city...
The appellant outlined.
The
Property
the
owner.
appellant, I believe, the appellant, I'm sorry. The appellant identified, initially, from what we discovered, a different area, other lots in different areas were identified. However, later, the city asked for those lots on the top of the subdivision, and then they were dedicated for parks and a park and tennis courts. But like in the early 90s, the city decided to sell them off, correct, as the appellant mentioned.
Okay. Are we done with the questions?
There may be more.
I just have one question. Are you going to continue it to look at it?
I don't need more information to make my decision, but if there are others that do, then the majority prevails, and we'll hold it over for further study and review.
I don't want to make comments of what's going to be continued over.
So would you like a motion then to continue this without further notice to next meeting, during which time we'll obtain from planning staff a complete copy of the EIR with the conditions, well, not the complete copy, but in particular the 23 conditions that were imposed on this subdivision on the tract map?
Right. Tentative tract map.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a
We
few-
may not have
there's
the
a-
EIR. That's
We may not have the
few
environmental.
things. If we're going to do that, there's a few things that I think that I'd like to see. I'd like to know, I mean, you said you already reviewed the that the CCNR, and that you're not sure that they really have a case based on CCNR. So there's two things. There's a few things. There's the EIR conditions. There's also I guess it's not conditions, but there was the later denial, right, from 1973 or 72?
The earlier denial.
Earlier denial.
79, I believe someone mentioned.
I think it was about 74.
I mean, I guess if we're going to continue it, I would like to know what conditions in totality have been put on these lots from whatever sources, and what the city in the past, what they had decided based on this lot. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I'm not going to make it a secret. I have concern, if these were already three separate lots and this applicant was coming in for a CUP, for whatever, that's one thing. But when you have people who may have bought property based on previous decisions or previous conditions, that becomes a lot more problematic for me. So I want to know, do they really have a reason to believe? Did they have a real reason to believe? And I understand city councils can overturn things, this and that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that they have a reasonable explanation when they bought their properties that that hillside would not be developed. So I'd like to know what evidence there is out there that might have led them to believe that, and whether there really is anything substantive either in their CCNR. And I understand that we're not responsible to enforce that, but you also said that we also could make a decision based on that. But more importantly, the conditions of the EIR and whatever decisions have been made by the city in the past. That's what I would like. Could a reasonable homeowner buying a piece of property have looked at those decisions and said, oh, well, the city has said this won't be developed, and here's why. I would just like to know that history and what your analysis is of kind of the strengths or weaknesses of any of those past decisions with regard to this.
Do you agree to that modification of your motion?
That's a request for further no, my motion is only to continue it with a request for information from the 23 conditions, and any other information that's requested, I think is reasonable. I mean,
Mr. Agani.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, based on what I heard from Councilmember Friedman, the way that we could provide that additional information, in addition to what Councilmember Najarian asked, is we could provide a chronology of the events that took place and highlight some of the conditions or other means that the city imposed regulation or requirements on the issue, without necessarily giving you finding, because we cannot promise that we can find all of the documentation, but we can recreate the chronology and provide that for you along with the information that Mr. Najarian asked.
And by the way, this is not new information that I think should require this to be reopened, because they've all been referencing it. I mean, they've all been referencing all of these conditions, and I think that it just behooves us to actually see what they've been what they're referencing, if we're going to make a decision based on that. So, I mean, if we can, I'm okay. I mean, I could decide now, but I'm also okay. I think I'd feel better waiting to see that information, because I'm kind of going by what they're saying without seeing it myself. So.
I understand. The only caveat, again, I would give that the decision ultimately should not be based on what's in the CCNRs. It should be based on the standards and the findings required by the code. But I'd be happy to give...
It's not the CCNRs, it's the conditions based on the approval of the...
Correct. And I think if you do continue, that would give us time to figure out, do those conditions... Typically, these conditions, they go away once the final map is approved, because they've been satisfied, they've been waived, or they've been bonded. Essentially, that's what happens. But we'll provide that analysis if you do agree to continue.
And if I may, if you would like us to do an analysis and write a report on our analysis, it would take more than a week. I would suggest at a minimum a month, given that we need to provide the material to the city clerk's office about 3 weeks.
Maybe you don't need to provide analysis. If we could just see what they're referencing, if we can just see
that
those
we could do.
Conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not my only concern with this. So I could vote tonight, but that's however.
If you simply need the information on the chronology, we could provide that fairly quickly. But if you need analysis, we would request respectfully.
I don't need analysis. I would just want to see what they're actually. They've been referring to.
I don't need written analysis, but I'd appreciate if staff was able to answer some questions pertaining to that.
That we could do.
And nothing I said this evening in any way denigrates the effort of staff. I know a lot of the players here were first-hand players and remember this like it was yesterday, but it was actually 40-some years ago. So I know Laura and Tim and Brian have worked very hard on this, and as well as you have. So I know it's an ongoing process. I appreciate your efforts, and I'm not dissing you guys. So.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Najarian made a motion. Is there a second?
What's the date? Next week?
23rd.
Okay, 23rd, without further public notice.
Just for the record, I might not be here on the 23rd.
No, leave it open.
Then let's hold it over to when we can all.
So we'll hold it over to when we have a full council the following week, perhaps.
30th.
All right, Mr. Najarian.
I might decide not to be here on the 30th.
That's what I thought.
I'll second it.
No, but the 23rd, certainly I will not be present at the council meeting.
Let me understand one thing. If I vote no, not to continue it, two of my colleagues will probably not vote for the project if they were even considering it, because you want additional information. So if it were to move forward, you would probably end up voting no, because you'd say, I don't have enough information. I better say I'm going to vote for the extension so you can get the information.
That's if you were in favor.
Yeah, if I were in favor, right? Because you're not going to make a decision without additional information.
You know what? I probably would, but I'd feel better that I had all the information. If there's no, it's 2 weeks, and I feel.
Understand what I'm saying, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. I'm going to vote against it because I basically don't need the information. I'm ready to vote. But we have a motion and a second to continue it.
As for me, I think I will vote in favor of getting the additional information. I think it's only fair because so many people mentioned or stated and referred to it, I think it's important to have that information.
And my only comment on all this, why didn't we have this in a timely manner before the Planning Commission even saw it? This last-minute blank that ends up on council members the day of the event is just plain wrong. This was no secret to some people in the community. Where was it? You put us in this kind of situation today. Now we're going to have to continue it. It's not fair to anybody, those that want it and those that don't. I don't know why it continues to happen.
I don't mind.
I didn't say it was fair. I said it's not fair to anybody.
I don't mind.
Good night, sir.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Menuchyan,
That was not proper, actually, what he just did. No.
Jarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Reluctantly, yes.
Quintero.
No. The motion carries 3-2. It will be held over approximately 2 weeks, depending on Mr. Menuchyan's schedule.
Yes.
That's just a joke. He'll be here. All right. Thank you very much.
No, and we would have voted on it today.
All right. Next.
There's going to be no votes on the project for sure.
Mayor and council, the next item on the agenda,
I don't
8B.
have information. I can't make a decision. I'm voting no. I'd rather have them informed and then maybe.
If we can ask members of the
Please
audience to
keep it
exit
quiet.
the council chambers.
Quiet on the way out, please. We have
Early
more
manner.
business.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming.
Thank you. 8B is Director of Community Development regarding proposed changes to Glendale Municipal Code 2.76 relating to the Historic Preservation Commission and GMC 15.20 relating to historic preservation. B1 is an ordinance for introduction, GMC 2.76. B2 is an ordinance for introduction, GMC 15.20.
Jay Platt for the Planning Division. I really, really wish I had some pretty pictures for you right now, but this is a very dry, pictureless presentation, but it's about some important amendments.
We can delay this vote if you'd like.
No, we'd like to go forward. We're proposing amendments to two sections of the Glendale Municipal Code, Section 2.76, which relates to the Historic Preservation Commission, and Section 15.20, which is basically the Historic Preservation Ordinance for the city, which establishes the Glendale Register, the reasons why we believe historic preservation is an important function of the city, and then also the section that sets up the procedures for designating historic resources and then regulating them once they're designated. When we look at 2.76, and with the council's permission, I'll present both of these sections in the same presentation. 2.76, we're looking really at performing some cleanups on the existing ordinance. We're not looking at any major changes. In general, both of these ordinances were written in 1996, and they haven't been revisited in any substantial way since then. So we felt this was a good opportunity not just to do the cleanups, but then to look at Section 1520 in particular and try to bring it into the present-day best practices that we experience in the historic preservation field. To do that, we've looked at a document prepared by the State Historic Preservation Office, which assists cities in creating effective historic preservation ordinances. And this document and what SHPO, the state office, looks at is that every city is different. So there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all historic preservation ordinance. But there are certain common goals, certain common types of features that we find in ordinances that we want to bring our ordinance up to date with. And then we also want to address the specifics that we find in Glendale so that we can tailor it to the needs of the people and to the council's goals for historic preservation. So I wanted to first let you know that both of these drafts have been reviewed by the city attorney, by the State Historic Preservation Office, and also by the Historic Preservation Commission. The commission voted to recommend that council approve both of the amendments as proposed. And I basically, sir?
Ask a question. Are you going to run through all the changes that we reviewed?
No.
Thank you.
Not even close. With your permission, I did select 3 of the sections of 1520 that have some more of the major changes, and then I can answer any questions or try to answer any questions you have for any of the other sections. The 3 subsections of article or of section 1520 that we really were proposing some serious changes would be in the definition section. This is to bring more clarity to the document. It's kind of surprising how many things were left undefined in the previous version of it. And the definition changes, some of them are basic. We actually make reference to the Secretary of the Interior Standards, which is the document that guides preservation nationally and that we want to make reference to in terms of the baseline of what we can approve or what we need to send to the Historic Preservation Commission when we're reviewing changes to Glendale Register properties. We're also clarifying certain concepts that were referenced in the earlier document but were never defined. Visibility, something basic like that, was never defined, so we now have a definition of what's visible from the street. And then we're making a few more major changes in terms of major alterations, minor alterations, and routine maintenance and repair. And this is really important for us because we tell people in Glendale that we try to keep the design review standards when you're a designated property very similar and the process very similar to the design review boards. So by making these changes in this document, we're going to be able to bring some consistency to the review process.
With that, can I introduce the ordinances at 8C 1 and 2?
If you would love to, but there is one major change that...
Let's not tell them what it is. Second?
Brilliant.
No, it's actually next
Oh,
week.
that's true.
Tell us the major thing next week. I introduce the ordinances. I'll see you during the week to find out what's major.
Who's pro tem?
Are there public speaker cards?
Okay, that concludes our
Communications.
item 8 action items. Next item is oral communications.
Have cards?
James Griggs, followed by Scott Nesbitt.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this is a 5-minute portion where discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes. You may question or answer a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision, and the manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
Mr. Griggs, before you start, let me apologize. I'm sorry you had, I know you were here at 6 along with your co-workers there, and the way oral communications works. But anyway, I think you got an idea of what we do on Tuesdays, having sat through everything.
If we had gone ahead, it'd be another hour.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, anyway,
Say it. Thank you.
My name is James Griggs, and I'm one of the station electricians that received layoff notice at Grayson Power Plant. And so, first of all, I'd like to say good evening to you, Honorable Mayor and council members and staff. Good evening to you all. And thank you, Councilmember Freeman, for your words of empathy and others. We appreciate that. This is a difficult time for myself as well as my brothers. But having said that, I wanted to talk to you about two things. One was the station electrician position and how the layoffs were and the bumping was done, the impact of that, and also about the power plant, the importance of having a trained and experienced electrical staff at the power plant. So we'll start with the station electrician position. I do feel I was targeted because I'm outspoken as a shop steward. And I say that because otherwise, why not initiate the layoffs in the broader station electrician population? This would have less of an impact on the minority shop. The job duties, definitions, minimum requirements, they read the same, word for word. The difference being job titles, class codes, and pay. And my pay is less. I'm not opposed to cross-training, but this is ill-planned, and the consequences are harmful to the power plant. For every megawatt that Grayson does not produce, you most certainly will have to import. The plant has already been harmed by the smart grid project, which essentially placed the smart grid on a dumb infrastructure. I mean, that's why we're back to capital projects, funding issues. You have to consider the age of the pipes, the poles, and the power plant. And so far as the electrical staff at the power plant, it's pretty critical. In terms of unit availability, experience and training to ensure the units are restored to service promptly during off-peak seasons. It requires a knowledge of the equipment to determine proper maintenance of units so they are available during the peak seasons when the revenue is generated. There's no other source that has that level of familiarity with the equipment besides that staff. The level of work. The level of work will continue to grow. It's made worse by aging equipment. Preventive maintenance would basically cease to exist. And it's once again a bad thing in an old power plant. The level of work at that plant will overwhelm a lone electrician, reducing him to basically a trouble call responder. Having a good preventive maintenance program will reduce forced outages and reduce the chances of employee injury. Without supervision, a lone electrician in a power plant is more apt to make a mistake that could have serious consequences. It's a very serious safety issue. One example would be just not wearing a proper flash protective suit. And this could occur because the guy's going from job to job to job, just trying to get the job done. Sooner or later, shortcuts are going to be taken. We have a history of having one electrician in a power plant, and it was 12 years ago approximately. His name was Ralph Calipan, and he was there by himself, and the results weren't good. His experience being alone caused him to meet with Matt Doyle, asking him for some qualified help, because he didn't have that. He was basically a lone person, a lone electrician in a power plant. So at that time, the managers even went a step further by promoting a supervisor to help manage the day-to-day activities of the shop. We all know the power plant equipment some of this is pretty technical. And it requires time to troubleshoot, even for me, and I'm an experienced electrician. It takes some time to do that. And the marketplace. In order for a plant that old to compete in the electric market, it really has to be maintained to the best of its ability, and even then it's inefficient. The value. Ultimately, I think it would be wise to take a different economic viewpoint. How much revenue were you able to generate from the power plant because of experienced and well-trained electrical staff? I'll give you one example. Only a few weeks ago, Unit 4 was out of service. The problem was on the voltage regulator system. It was a small printed circuit board. It took out a whole generator. I was able to repair that because of my training and experience, and the generator went back in service. So ultimately, the labor cost is pretty minimal compared to the revenue that could be generated. I would like to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Scott Nesbitt, followed by Robert Asaturian.
Mr. Mayor, Council, staff, good evening. My name is Scott Nesbitt, a proud member of the IBEW Local 18, Unit 40 Electrical Underground Substructure. Tonight, I appreciate the opportunity to list for the record some serious issues my fellow union brothers and I believe the City Council is responsible for. The list reads as follows. The surplus in the Water and Power Reserve Fund that was allocated to pay for the smart meter project. Rate increases to support the infrastructure and the failure to support that said infrastructure. The use of those funds to assist in balancing the general fund budget. The use of those funds to pay for projects such as libraries, parks, street services,
and a $5.3 million bicycle path. Not planning for the expenditures related to the reservoir upgrades, inadequate rate increases to maintain the existing water system infrastructure, transferring $21 million from the Electrical Revenue Fund in July of 2012. The current $10.8 million deficit at the Glendale Water and Power, the layoffs of 18 of my union brothers, and the taking of food off the tables of all 18 of those members' families. We lay this responsibility and this blame on each and every one of you. Shame on you.
Robert Asaturian, followed by Margaret Hammond.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, City Council members. I, Robert Asaturian, 26 years, Glendale resident, current membership director of SCAD, Southern California Armenian Democrats. I would like to inform you that SCAD is an organization of 400 active members, and our mission is to promote improved quality of life in our local communities. In addition, our mission is to educate and inform Armenian American community of democratic policies and motivate the public to continue actively take part in Southern California democratic proceedings. On behalf of SCAD, I'd like to thank you, the city manager and city council members, for doing such a wonderful job keeping our city safe and beautiful. SCAD participated in Glendale's Unity Fest, and the event had a great turnout and was well planned. SCAD encourages and recommends the city administration and city council to continue creating more programs like Unity Fest, which unite and bring our community together. And if possible, we recommend more funding for such programs in our beautiful city. I would also like to recognize and thank Patty Betancourt at Parks and Recreation for her support, assistance, and courtesy and professionalism during preparations for Unity Fest. SCAD always looks forward to working with City of Glendale to improve our community, promote better quality of life, and increase community involvement. Thank you, and have a great evening, gentlemen.
Thank you. Margaret Hammond.
Good evening, Your Honor, Mayor, members of City Council, staff, and there's no audience. Everybody's gone home, I guess. So, whoa, there you are. Okay. My name is Margaret Hammond, longtime resident of Glendale. Yeah, I did have to get up and walk. Otherwise, I would have had a Charlie horse, and somebody would have had to come and rub it out on my knee. So, anyway, I would like to say quality of life things. Number one, Glendale bulky item pickup, free. 818-548-3916. There's always bulky items laying around. I guess particularly people moving and so forth. The second thing that is very important to me and to our city is the swift graffiti removal. That is very, very important. Call 818-548-3700. Get it removed right away before it becomes a problem. And my other thing that's, there were some people here from the Glendale College this evening, many of whom I know, of course, for many years. I happen to belong to the Patrons Club of Glendale College, and we have 65 years in the city. I know the college is 85. We were formed just 20 years after they came into existence. We are having our luncheon fashion show up at the Castaways on November the 2nd. And the number to call is 818-242-7334 for the luncheon. It's $45 for the luncheon. We will have a silent auction and the $1,000 raffle available. I think it was almost $20,000 last year we raised for scholarships for the college. So not bad for a bunch of old ladies, getting out there and doing their thing. The other thing I want to bring up again is a state-issued ID voting from the state, cards or whatever it is, and it's www.tpac.net. So if you are in favor of having that state-issued ID, please call that and join. Now, the next thing that I'm really up in arms about is about the billboards along the freeway that are being proposed. And I know there was a meeting last night at 780 Flower Street. Fortunately, I was to be there, but I got delayed and couldn't get there in time. There were only 14 people. Now, I want to know how you can expect input from the community that those people, Grand Central, Pelanconi, and Rancho, would be affected by these billboards, the neon signs being put up, and what the input. They're not for it, but there wasn't any notification of the people in the area. I spoke to the one lady, I was the one who told her, who is the president of the Grand Central, was not aware till I informed her that there was going to be a meeting last night. And so I do feel that if you're going to be going ahead with this, and there is a possibility, and I think there absolutely positively should be, of notifying people that are interested in protesting these signs. As I said before, how many $100,000 did we pay out with Mr. Yusefian was one of the proponents, that to take down the billboards that were on San Fernando Road and Foothill and other areas. Got rid of those blights, those eyesores. So again, I'm saying, why are we going there? We think we're going to make money on them. What about the people that live, that have to look at them, and it affects their property values and their quality of life? So I do think if you're going to be doing it, and that you should have more public input before you go ahead with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's my final card for oral communications. Any comments?
Move we adjourn.
Mr. Ochoa?
So.
Yes, sir. It's unfortunate that our employees, and perhaps even former or soon-to-be former employees, pending the outcome of the layoff procedure, wouldn't stick around to listen to the other side of the story that perhaps they don't want to hear. When you consider that they received some bad news, the same bad news that was received by many of our employees, the 55 who were laid off who are not part of the utility, or the 13 million across this country that are currently unemployed. That is never news that folks want to hear, and it's certainly not news that we enjoy delivering, but it is a reflection of the economy that we find ourselves in. And so when folks get distraught, they do get emotional, and unfortunately they also get a whole lot wrong. And as I listen to some of those comments, I just need to make sure that we correct that record. Employees were not targeted, certainly not employees who are members of the respective associations and unions. That is completely false. Speaking specifically to IBEW, I believe we have something like 9 shop stewards. 2 of the 9 actually did receive layoff notices. Mr. Griggs was one. But if 2 received such notices, that means 7 did not. It's hardly a targeting of those employees who are leaders among their coworkers. At the end of the day, his position was seen as something that could be laid off because we are looking to find efficiencies, particularly at the power plant. And I'm sure he can speak with Mr. Zern about the way that we would hope to work going into the future that really renders his position marginal, that we can do that work much more efficiently in different ways. Also, there was some discussion about a $5.3 million investment in bicycle paths. I can only presume that they're talking about the recently approved bicycle master plan, which, again, does not actually pay for or advance any of the construction of the projects that were listed in that master plan. It is just that, a master plan, a toolbox, and any such
projects, capital projects, would largely, maybe even entirely, be funded by grants, not from funds from the GWP operations, let alone the city's general fund. You heard the familiar refrain of smart grid. When, again, we have looked at our investment in smart grid, Glendale was one of the first ones into that pool, and folks have decried that. At the end of the day, it was a budgeted expense that was augmented by federal dollars, and with a world that's going digital, I don't see a modern utility holding back that tide. But you see how folks caught in the past don't like to look to the future because they're afraid of what it shows. This notion of inadequate, to use the term from Mr. Nesbitt, inadequate rate increases. Well, to the extent that he's having trouble putting food on the table, which is something that certainly we can empathize with, I think that that empathy needs to be shown to the folks that pay the bills, our residents and ratepayers. We, and this council in particular, has been extremely judicious about balancing what that burden is on the people that actually pay the bills, and that would be our ratepayers here in town. When something that Mr. Nesbitt said that did strike me, and I think perhaps it's kind of a very self-evident and obvious point, but it's something maybe to close on and maybe paraphrase him just a bit. He laid the responsibility and the blame at the feet of the council. I suppose I would change that to the extent that what is laid at your feet, and certainly as you direct me, city attorney, and the staff, is that you have the responsibility and the obligation to ensure the viability and solvency of this organization. This is not the city of GWP, let alone the city of IBW. This is the city of Glendale, and we exist for that benefit and are obliged and beholden to those stakeholders that vest that public trust with you, and certainly to nobody else.
The comments? Do I have a motion to it? Oh, yeah, you have new business.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the matter entitled Perrin versus City of Glendale Superior Court Case number EC 057298 be compromised and settled full and complete sum of $72,000, that the same is hereby approved and accepted, and the Director of Finance is authorized to issue a warrant in said sum for delivery by the City Attorney upon the execution by the plaintiff of a release and dismissal with prejudice.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmembers Friedman?
Yes.
Manukian?
Yes.
Jarian?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Quintero?
Yes. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.